Today is July 11th, 2018. The time is 7:31 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to same as provided by law, of a schedule including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call, please.
Deputy Mayor Knudsen.
Here.
Sorry. Councilman Seaton.
Here.
Councilman Voigt.
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh.
Here.
Mayor Hache.
Here. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join us in a moment of silence in honor of the brave men and women serving in our armed forces and as first responders. Thank you. All right, we'll start with public comments, not to exceed 3 minutes per person. Please state your name and address, please.
Laurie Weber, 235 South Irving Street. Repeated attempts by some residents to get information from the Board of Education and Dr. Fishbein about moving our school elections back to April have been either met with resistance or ignored. We have already given them more than ample chance to address this issue. There is currently a bill pending in the New Jersey Senate that could extend the moratorium on moving back our elections indefinitely. The time to act is now, and the Village Council must do what our Board of Education will not. Board of Education meetings held for discussion of moving the election to November were not advertised robustly to the entire community, nor have seats coming up for re-election on the school board each of the years since the election was moved. As a result, none of those seats were contested. At $43,000, Mr. Longto severely inflated the costs of holding the school elections in April, which according to the County Board of Elections is more likely in the $25,000 to $30,000 range at most. But the most disturbing piece of misinformation is Mr. Longto's assertion of declining voter turnout and what it means. Voter turnout hinges on public interest. In 2010, when Ridgewood voters were concerned about proposed budget cuts to certain teaching positions, we spoke up and we were ignored. So we spoke with our votes and enjoyed a turnout at the polls commensurate with most November election turnouts. We defeated that budget, thus allowing our village council the opportunity to save a teaching position. So really, the declining voter turnout since then were testament to how effective our vote can be. It's not that we were uninterested. We subsequently enjoyed a little more respect from our Board of Education and were once again satisfied with the next few budget proposals. Contrary to Mr. Longto's assertions, there has been no formal studies done showing the impact of moving school elections to November, but it's easy to see the negative impact this has had on Ridgewood over the past 4 years. Moving our school elections to November only serves to take attention away from local issues in the face of more far-reaching elections. The spring has proven to be the ideal time for residents to focus their attention specifically on local matters. We need to preserve that meaningful, informed voting on a local level. No form of government can help or hurt you on a day-to-day basis like your local government can, and we cannot let these concerns get lost or confused with partisan state and national issues. Mr. Longto can cite all the November voter turnouts he likes, but with no contested school board seats and no budget to vote on, our school elections have become meaningless. Checks and balances do indeed work, and we should all be very skeptical of a public entity that chooses to take them away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Good evening.
my name is Mary Crevy, and I live at 814 Morningside Road. And I'm sorry I didn't hear the whole discussion that the prior speaker made, but I am completely opposed to moving the Board of Education elections back to April. I work at the polls at Willard School. I have been doing it since 2013. People show up for the presidential election and for the election about any time there's a question about the garage. They don't show up for anything else. We sit up at Willard on primary day, and very few people come in. For council elections, very few people come in. 14 people work at Willard on election day. There are 3 districts. We each get paid $200. That's not a lot of money. On the other hand, how many people are we employing all over the village to man an election? Also, Willard has to get a security guard because we have 2 doors and there is nobody manning the California Street door. So village is paying 14 people, the HSA is paying 1. We're paying for the machines to be delivered and to be picked up. We're paying for the ballots to be composed and mailed out. And P.S., we can't raise our taxes. We can deduct now $10,000 worth of state and local taxes. We should be looking for ways to save money, not to spend more. And based on my experience, which is limited, admittedly, I'm at one school, but I don't see a lot of people coming out to vote if it isn't November. There's nothing we can do about the June elections, but honestly, I believe our elections should be condensed to June and November, and it will save us money. And I think at this point, that's a very important consideration. If people are not happy with what the Board of Education is doing, they have the right to vote against people that are running for election. Maybe they won't get to vote against them tomorrow, but they will have their chance to express their opinion. So I encourage you to not move the Board of Education election to April, because it's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to result in reduced voter turnout.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Saurabh Dani, 390 Bedford Road in Ridgewood, and I'm here to request that please don't take my right away to vote. We received an email from Board of Ed a few days ago, and I think yesterday, that alerted that in today's agenda there is an item that you guys are discussing about moving the elections back for Board of Ed from November to April. And the short research that I've done in last 2 days, I just wanted to present some facts. The email mentions that they will have about 85 days, they can notify the county 85 days before April, and we have time, so there's no rush, and they can do that in fall. But there is a pending legislation in Senate. If that is approved or if that is enacted, then this option will go away. So we have a very short window to act. We cannot wait till fall to act on that. So that is that if Board of Ed is sincere about that, they can come here. This is also a public forum. They can come here as residents. They have every right. They can express their opinion, and you guys can jointly make a decision with them. So we have to make a decision now. We cannot delay it to fall. The second thing is a resident, Dan Creed, created a poll on Ridgewood Moms and Dad Not Free Speech today, and within last few hours, 59 people have voted on that poll to move the election to April, and only 6 people have voted not to move. And that group is relatively different. But still, even on that group, 59 people have voted to move the election to April. So that tells you the resident sentiment. The third one is some people were talking there about security, that more times you have elections in elementary school, there is a problem with security. And if there is a problem with security in Ridgewood with election, even one election is a problem. So I think you would fix that security problem and not use that to take my right away to vote. Another thing that was discussed, I called NJ School Board Association today, NJ SBA, and they confirmed a few facts. They said if we have election in November, residents can never vote on a budget. If we have an election in April, that's the only way for us to vote. So that's the takeaway here. It's not the cost, it's not the security, it's not the inconvenience, it's my basic right to vote on a budget. So if you do not take this action now, if you do not move it back to April, and Clifton just did that. In June, Clifton moved their elections back from November to June. So if you don't, and other towns are considering that, so if you don't move it back, then you are not giving me the right to vote on the budget. If the election happens in November, there's no way for me to vote on the budget. So it's not about the cost. The cost is $45,000, $40,000, $43,000. That's $2 per resident.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Rorick Halaby, 374 Evergreen Place. I want to support what Mary Krevy said. Moving the vote to April or to May would be a catastrophe. In fact, I would go even further by saying the municipal elections should be moved to April. One of the most disgusting experiences I have witnessed is to see in the last election 28% of the people voted. What a shame. What a shame. I mean, it's awful. Now, I can see special interests like these off elections because what I call the vocalantes come out in force. And then ma'am, I wish you would stop shaking your head. That's very rude. And a point of order to you. Okay? A point of order.
Please continue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay? If the deputy mayor has something to say, come out and say it. Just shaking your head and looking so aggrieved.
I'm going to call a point of order.
No, I'm calling a point of order.
Point of order.
I have the right to call a point of order.
Point
Mr.
of
Halby,
order.
please
Anyway.
continue, because it's eating into your time.
Okay. Basically, I am against moving the election to April. It'll be an awful way of keeping people away from voting. We need to move the municipal elections actually to November too. So I agree with Mary Krevy totally, and I urge you not to start mucking around with something that should not be touched. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening,
evening.
Mayor Hache, ladies and gentlemen of the Village Council. My name is Matthew Lindenberg from 165 Claremont Road. My family and I are here, 12-year
Could I just have you bring the microphone up a little bit so we can hear you?
My family and I are, is this better? 12-year residents of the village. I speak tonight for the first time regarding the election timing, as with the other speakers. Many members of the community and I believe that moving more local elections to April would in fact be a step backwards, when we should be taking a step forwards by moving our village council elections to November to coincide with state and national elections. I'd like to address 4 factors critical to this topic: cost, participation and voter turnout, the influence of special interests, and maintaining the nonpartisan flavor of our elections. First, cost. As has already been highlighted here, depending upon which estimate we look at, somewhere between $25,000 to $40,000 is the cost of running an additional election in April. Those are dollars that can and frankly should be saved when we're trying to find dollars for other programming around the village. Second, turnout. The last 3 local elections saw terribly low voter turnout. That was 20% in 2014, 37% in 2016, 27% in 2018. Shifting all of our elections to November allows us to gain the exposure and the participation from the broader visibility that national and state elections bring with them. That, of course, leads to the third factor, the influence of special interests. Because of that low voter turnout that I just mentioned, our local elections have been disproportionately and very vocally influenced by the most passionate supporters of special interests on both sides of issues and candidates. November elections will generate votes from a broader cross-section of village residents and minimize the influence of special interests. Finally, I agree that it's important to maintain the nonpartisan nature of this village council and the Board of Education. That said, there are ample examples of success from around the state from other municipalities who have already made this change. For that matter, anyone claiming that spring elections maintain a small-town civil tone clearly wasn't paying attention during the last election cycle. In summary, moving all village elections to coincide with other November elections reduces costs, increases voter participation, decreases special interest influence, and all of that with minimal impact to the character of our local politics. I implore the council to take a step forward by moving all of our elections to November, rather than taking a step backwards by moving school board elections into the spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. Steve Kim, 291 Highland Avenue.
I'm sorry, sir. Would you repeat that, please?
Oh, sure. 291 Highland Avenue.
Thank you.
So what I want to talk about tonight, I think I'm too close, is I think we need to clarify, and I think we need to all know the facts, right? So the question is whether we get to vote on the budget or we don't, right? In order for us to vote on the budget, it needs to happen in April. If it goes to November, we don't get to vote on that budget. That budget doesn't exist for us, right? So 2/3 of our tax dollars go to the school, but we have no say in how it gets formulated. We have no say in how it gets managed, how it gets allocated. Does that sound right to you? Because it doesn't sound right to me. It just doesn't. This is coming from an immigrant. Voting power is important. Voting is important. Do not take this away from us. Don't take away the right to vote on the budget. It is important. It's a lot of money. It's $110 million. It's 2/3 of our tax dollars. You take this away and stick it in November where we don't get to vote on it. You have taken away significant amount of rights from the residents, and it's not right. And the BOE is trying to circumvent this by not disclosing the full amount of detail so that people understand. It's just not right. Okay, now voter turnout. Voter turnout is important. It's important because it is the right of the people not to show up, but it is a right, and we should give that right to people so that if they don't want to show up, they don't have to show up, but it doesn't mean that we take that vote away, because if we did that, this country would not be what it is today. Voter turnout means that people have the right to show up or not show up, because the right to do something means that they don't have to do it, but they have the right to do it. We should have the right to vote. And if people don't show up, that's fine. But at least we have been given the right, and we want that right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Jane Shinazuka, 825 Norgate Drive. And I'm actually glad to finally meet the, Steve Kim is kind of the Unabomber. You only hear what he writes, and nobody ever sees him. So it's very interesting to finally meet you. But I didn't plan to say anything, but I'm sitting in the back listening, and if what Mr. Donnie is saying is true, if it's verified that if we don't move it, we absolutely can't vote, if that's a big issue. Number two, I've always said, things that seem like a luxury or things that we really want sometimes cost extra money. Lord knows we spend a lot of money around here on certain things. So that's another thing. We're talking about $25,000 or $40,000. That's another thing to think about. And my third concern is, regardless, if we're getting down to talking about using the phrase special interest groups on the municipal level, it's discouraging to say the least. However, we sort of don't want to give in to that and let that be the guiding principle whether or not we move, because you could make just as much of an argument that people would, when you go, if it was a presidential year or even the midterms coming up, they're going to be so engaged otherwise that they're not going to think about our stuff. So there are arguments on both sides. But, I think that we should be very careful about whether or not we
base it only on what is relatively a small amount of money compared to other expenses. And also, what worries me very much is if you want to use the last election as an example, no matter which way you fell out on it, moving it to November very, very possibly is going to politicize any vote. Any vote we have in November, it takes anything here and really politicizes it. There's going to be a lot of down ballot voting, and that is something we have to really, we really have to think about how we want our local issues thought about, treated, and voted upon. So, I don't know if it'd be the end of the world either way, but I don't think that should be disregarded, and I don't think the relative cost should be the guiding factor. So I hope you take that into consideration. And I also hope that we can confirm, I wish I knew, but I don't. If we really have absolutely no other chance if we don't move it back, then that's a very big concern, and I hope you don't disregard that too.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Denise Lima, 319 East Glen Ave. I think it's the first time I've been here since the new council, so welcome everybody, and I really look forward to us working together and moving the community in a non-fracture way, moving fast in our decisions, maybe working on things less and fewer things that are going to have more impact to the residents. When I was here last in May, we talked about, I had a list of things looking for a status, and we talked about the duck pond, and we heard some really great news on doing some improvements to the duck pond. And just to let you know, the residents had 400 hits on various Facebook pages. Everybody's very excited to see the county park revitalized. It's an entryway into Ridgewood, into our downtown. So we had some really good responses for that. Still haven't heard a little bit about more information about the master plan, some information about where we are with the contamination of the garage. I see it's part of the closed hearing tonight, but the public, I think, is looking for a status on where we are with resurrecting that. I saw a lot of good communications about paving of roads. I still think that there's some paving of lots that people in the central business district are still asking, when does it get on the list, at least the list, and then the date maybe can come later. I also just want to heed that there's so much going on as a resident, thinking about 60 million for a budget, 12 million for a garage, library, all of a sudden it's a lot for everybody, and I think that's probably part of the passion that's fueling it. So we can't look at things individually, we really have to look at it more holistically, which I'm sure you're doing as part of the plan. The last thing I just want to talk about is safety. And so a few things on safety. Again, there's a lot of feedback on local streets that people are still going through stop signs, speeding really fast. Where and when can we get, bumps, humps, whatever you want to call them, speed protection? We've got to get things very quickly. It's not expensive. We did Maple Field really fast. How do we start getting things done about that in the speeding? And 2 points to that. Today, a tractor trailer at the corner of Northern Parkway and Linwood, I could not make the right from Glen. I'm making the right onto Linwood. Traffic was really bad, and yes, people are going 40 miles an hour. A tractor trailer, and a girl was trying to cross the street. A tractor trailer going 50 miles an hour was not stopping. Almost swerved to hit the girl.
Thank you.
So we need to do something about that.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ellie Gruber, 229 South Irving. I really wasn't going to come out and speak about this, but I'm a big supporter of voting of any kind, and for money to be a concern where it comes to the right to vote, I think is not the right way to look at it. I agree with some of the people that spoke here. First of all, as far as the primary is concerned, I would like to know if the political parties would be willing to give up the primary because it costs too much money. I don't think so. they want people to vote in a primary. It doesn't matter what the percentage is. It's a party primary, and that's how the parties determine who their candidates are. Since the vote was changed to November, which I was against when it came out, I say I don't remember the last time we had a contested candidates for the Board of Ed. I don't remember any notice being given out by the Board of Ed when people can run. It's like we have to take this back. I really agree. We should move it back to April. I don't think cost should even be a consideration when it comes to the right to vote. And a lot of people, by the way, are voting by mail. That does take away people at the polls. And I know some states are giving up, they're only voting by mail, which I don't agree with. But I understand the poll workers' concern. I've gone to vote when I'm the only person there for about a half hour. But don't take the opportunity away, and don't politicize it. Don't make it anything to do with a party election, going down ballot, stuff like that. I really urge you to take advantage of the opportunity to get it back to April, and I think we're going to have more interest and more participation in Board of Ed matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Aditya Singh, 182 Mountain Avenue. So I had many points to speak for moving the elections up to April, but most of them have already been said about. So I'll just say that I support moving the elections to April. And as one of the highest school tax-paying residents, the residents should have a right to speak on the school budget, and the only way we can do it is by moving the election to April. So I request you to consider it and approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Lorraine Reynolds, 550 Windermere Avenue. I was watching this on TV and I felt I had to come down and speak. I am so for moving the Board of Ed elections to April. Ellie took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say I can't remember the last time we had a contested Board of election because I don't think there has been since we moved it to November. That aside, we can't vote. We cannot vote on the budget if it's in November. We can only vote on the budget if it's in April. That alone should be the slam dunk. You cannot take away a resident's right to vote. That's the one and only reason, and the most important reason, to move it back to April. Every citizen has a right to vote on the budget, and we have not been able to since it was moved to November. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Pamela Perrin, 123 Kenilworth Road. I speak on behalf of the League of Women Voters Water Committee. We'd like to commend the July 4th committee, Tara Masterson, Chris Raimondi, and all the volunteers for the organizational feat they pulled off in staging the parade and the fireworks. The League of Women Voters Water Committee surveyed the length of the parade to see how many single-use plastic water bottles were sold, consumed, dropped in the street, left in the garbage, or recycled. We were pleasantly surprised at how few bottled waters were in evidence at the parade. Instead, the July 4th committee had set up water stations at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the parade. So people didn't have to resort to plastic bottled drinks. And also we saw many people brought their own coolers, cups, reusable bottles, and as a result, we didn't see as many plastic water bottles as we had anticipated. As you know, plastic is clogging our waterways and filling our oceans. So we took this to be a sign of a small shift in our culture. And if we're right, we would like to thank the July 4th committee for taking that first step in the right direction.
Thank you. Anyone else? You know, I have to say, you have been so gracious. I saw you trying to get up about 20 times.
I'm waiting for everybody to finish talking, yeah. Martin Walker, 114 Cottage Place. I just want to start by congratulating our new mayor, Ramon Hatch. Has made, I think, all of us very proud, and to be a town with having a mayor like you, I just want to say, si se puede.
Thank you.
I've just started following some of the arguments about whether or not to move the school board elections, and I think my main concern is to make changes that would allow the budget to be voted on by the town as a whole at the earliest possible opportunity. While the excellence of our schools is unquestionable, and I'm a direct beneficiary with 3 children involved, a majority of our voters should have the opportunity to decide whether Ridgewood can continue to be such an extreme outlier in Bergen County in terms of proportion of school members that it has to its overall population. This current system is presently engineering our elders, our empty nesters, and our long-term families out of the town. And I think nobody planned it this way, but that's what it's come to be. And I think it's imperative that beyond the issue of whether people have a right to vote or not, that the majority of our community has the opportunity to be heard in this issue as soon as possible. And I just want to very briefly, looking around at the maps, this discussion has come up in the safety committee quite a bit. I just have to offer a very heavy cringe, because I cannot believe that anybody in 2018 would consider increasing our carbon footprint, making more space allowable for cars, and eliminating green that will never, ever be replaced. Urban communities all over the country are dealing with this. I don't think it's rocket science. Everybody's moving in the same direction. More pavement, less green is the absolute wrong way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. Move on to discussion items. We have a very big agenda today, so we'll get started.
Okay, so the first item is under Ridgewood Water. It's awarding contract for a public policy consultant. As you recall, earlier this year, we had a trial program with Morford Drulis to gauge the usefulness of a public policy consulting for the water utility. The trial period has been completed and it was successful, and so Mr. Calby, who's the director of Ridgewood Water and Operations, has recommended that we do a 1-year contract with Morford Drulis. In the last few months, what they've accomplished, the utility has been afforded the opportunity of meeting with key legislators and public policy representatives in the state. They've developed a program that demonstrates Ridgewood Water's leadership in the industry and an initiative towards smarter water governance. This approach will aid the state and federal governments as they tackle this issue. Most notable to Mr. Calby has been getting involved with legislative staff members and shaping legislation that otherwise would have moved forward without any industry review. Mr. Drulis' work on behalf of the village has helped the utility engage other like-minded utilities and organizations which are working towards the same goal. It's an amount of $52,000 for 1 year.
I have one question. When we started down this road, our initial meeting, I understood that the consortium we were going to be partnering with, that other municipalities that are operating their own water utilities would possibly be sharing in this cost. I just want to know, it's possible I misremember, but what is the status of that? Do we have anything on that?
I don't have anything with them sharing. I know that they have informally met with other like-minded utilities. I don't know that an official consortium has been formed yet. So, Mr. Calby has been away from the office. So I will find that information out for all of you prior to next week's meeting.
Okay, great, thank you.
I also had one. With, is there any kind of plan to look for state funding or federal funding? Because I know a lot of big numbers have been thrown out for the upgrades that are needed for the water department. So I was wondering if there are grants or aid available, or if there'd be some way that like this person could help lobby to create. Because it seems like there's grants for trees, there's grants for paving, there's handicapped accessible ramp grants. There's almost a grant for everything if you look for it. And water is such an important part of life. You would think that there'd be grants or aid available to help water utilities deliver.
Absolutely, and I have Mr. Dan Timoney here, who is our business manager for Ridgewood Water, and he can probably address those questions.
Certainly. So good evening. So absolutely, that is one of the primary issues for us that we are exploring with Michael Drulis. One example, just this Monday, I attended a meeting with Congressman Lance in Westfield, New Jersey. We talked about what the federal government may be pursuing in terms of funding programs, access to funding programs, voicing our concern about making sure that the federal government, and thus as it flows downward through state and JDEP, not all utilities are created equal, but understanding that we are all going to be facing these same infrastructure, emerging contaminant challenges over the coming years and decades. So wanting to set up a more friendly, accessible stream of funding is a huge concern and something that Mr. Drulis is working for us diligently on.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Boyd, you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor. So the proposal, the letter of intent, you talk about proposed plan and approach. Is there any way they can put in this, what they intend on delivering is after a year, so we know what we're getting for our, what is it, $52,000?
So, I mean, certainly, included in some of the materials along with this are some things that that Mr. Drulis has already put together for legislators to get us acquainted with them, so that as we revisit and issues are kind of brought back up to a level of discussion where they're more concrete as these emerging contaminant and infrastructure issues become more prominent for NJDEP. We want to have a seat at the table as those decisions are being made. We want to be one of the utilities that has a voice in giving the real world perspective of what it is like for a public utility and the challenges that we face. So beyond just, general access, it's really trying to get us a seat at the table so that we have the ability to weigh in on and offer our opinion and the best course forward on the things that we need to do to be financially sound over the long haul.
Yeah. So we'll be voting on this as a resolution, is that right? And that'll happen?
That'll be next week. Next week. Yeah. Correct.
Is it too late to ask for them to modify the letter of intent to say, okay, here's what we're going to get for the 50? I mean, you've got these goals and plan, but it'd be nice to know, okay, this is at the end of the year, this is what we're going to get for the $52,000. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for specific deliverables for that money.
Okay.
All right. And then the other thing that's in the proposal, it's on the last page. It says these changes have the possibility of saving Ridgewood millions of dollars. Okay. And I don't know what that means. I mean, where are they going to save the millions of dollars?
So I'll give you an example. So as we look at infrastructure, mains, distribution, those types of things, historically, grants are made available to certain utilities, public utilities, based on socioeconomic factors of a community. So some of those grants we have not been able to access based on the relative status of the village. So going forward, perhaps being able to push something where those conditions don't exist, understanding that all utilities are facing this issue, or asking that if a potential list of emerging contaminants is going to come out, that it comes out sort of all at once so that we know the problem that we're dealing with. So that if we have to install treatment at one facility, we can plan for the other things that have to potentially be done at that facility, rather than spend a bunch of money up front and have to redo something or tweak the arrangement at that parcel of land to accommodate something else that might happen. So we'd really like to kind of get a coherent strategy from the regulators, and that would be one way that we would definitely have an inside track to information on how we would want to set up our funding structures.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one question. So we're hiring this consultant to provide the service for us. So how is that going to change the water utility employees' time? Like, they're going to obviously have more time on their hands. So where is that? Are they going to be working with them? What's the trade-off?
So his work and skill set is largely in addition to the workflow, or entirely in addition to the workflow that the utility is already doing. So his ability and his access to legislators now, all of the meetings that we've been having are not things that have been done before in the past. So it's in addition to our current work or our past workflow. It's not removing any employee work or responsibilities from the day-to-day.
So will they essentially be our representative then at the table?
Correct. He is our representative. So, for example, Monday, like I said, with Congressman Lance, he organized a group and they put together a policy memo for Congressman Lance. He had that in advance. We all voiced our individual concerns or issues, did a Q&A roundtable discussion with him, and Mr. Julis is the moderator of that discussion. He's the one who has experience working with Congressman Lance and gets us in front of him so that he is informed as to issues that are affecting municipalities that he may not be aware of, or that he might not understand the differences between New Jersey funding and something that might happen in the Midwest. So kind of shaping the lay of the land for him that way. Yeah. But he is representing the village of Ridgewood and our interests in these issues.
So he's not acting as a lobbyist. He doesn't have a lobbyist license or anything like that?
I don't know, actually. I don't know what he's registered as. Okay. But here he is a public policy consultant for us and our individual issues.
Okay, and then how are we going to give our input? Is there going to be any formal way for us to get input to him to speak on our behalf or speak on the residents' or the ratepayers' behalf, I guess?
I don't know that that's been explored at any point, but...
Right, but he is speaking on our behalf already. He's put together pamphlets and things that he gets to the legislators, and he also, I was at one meeting where we were with representatives, and he represented the village of Ridgewood. Before the representatives, I think it was the assistant DEP commissioner, was that correct?
Yes.
And we were trying to get a meeting with the DEP commissioner, and so the assistant was saying it's possible that we could get before the DEP commissioner to give our concerns, and so it was very helpful to have Mr. Julis there because he was kind of the one pushing that direction with the assistant commissioner. So I have to say, in the one meeting I was in with him, he was very effective. I have not been before the legislators themselves, as Mr. Calvi and Mr. Timoney have, but he is absolutely representing the concerns and the interests of Ridgewood Water with this legislation, which affects all utilities. However, smaller public utilities such as us, we're a larger public utility, but we're not huge. We're going to have to do the same things as these private utilities, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, and they don't realize how it affects us because, we're not a Suez and we're not a United Water. And so by getting in front of them, they're understanding better what it means to a smaller size utility that's publicly held with public money and what those concerns and challenges are.
Okay, so if we could just get copies of what he's been
Oh, sure.
Sure,
yeah.
absolutely.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We have an idea. Yeah. Thank you. Is that it already in here, though? Some of it?
Yeah, some of that is already in
materials
here.
are in here.
I don't believe it's exhaustive, but the
Yeah.
pamphlet is and some other materials, yeah.
But we can get more.
Very small print.
And I just think in fairness, because when we met with Michael, I think it was very helpful to understand. I think there's some confusion about what his role is and how he operates. He's not in our day-to-day operations. He's down in Trenton, he's in Washington. He's navigating complex issues that necessarily we would not have access to. And as a small utility, what we found, and what I gathered from our meeting, is that the larger Suez had all of the power, the pull, and the say, and we were essentially being lost in the shuffle, the small utilities. So I think that he's giving us a very real voice in that environment, where otherwise we would just be, we're invisible. We would be invisible. So I think that, to Councilman Voigt's question or concern, a set of deliverables, I don't know that that can be deliverables can't really be in this document, because I don't know how that's even possible, because for lack of a better word, it's a little bit of a fluid situation. You don't know day to day how these things move forward. So
one question, in building this consortium.
Correct.
What's the criteria? I mean, obviously, we want to be sort of teamed up with similarly sized utilities because we're facing the same sort of challenges and so on. But who handles that? Who determines who's part of this group? Are we sort of open the doors?
We've been casting a wider net, is really how we've been looking at it. So looking for public utilities, certainly in the area, but we've also had conversations with and meetings with utilities further down in central New Jersey. And Mr. Julis obviously has access to utilities in southern New Jersey as well. But we are definitely looking at the public utility route. We share the same concerns. We are forced to operate within the same global context, unlike what the for-profit entities do. And so on our end, those shared concerns are more impactful if we can deliver that with a unified voice. And so that's been the goal behind establishing the consortium. So we have met as a larger group already, once actually here in Ridgewood, but those conversations have been ongoing about even smaller issues now. We've established a line of communication with the utilities about how they might be doing a certain thing or a best practice in a given area. But yeah, that's sort of how it's been broadcast. It's really casting a wider net for public utilities in New Jersey. So far to date, it's been mostly local participation with a spattering of other utilities, but we are looking to cast a wider net.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay. So the next item is the professional services for the East Side Reservoir improvements. Proposals were obtained. Pricing is for the design and construction administration of the improvements of the East Side Reservoir. Proposals were actually solicited from the pre-qualified engineering firms, and T&M Associates of Middletown, New Jersey was the lowest cost proposal at $57,000. This is critical that these improvements are made to this tank. It has to be completed by July 15, 2019, per an administrative order of consent to the US EPA. This is the last of 9 tanks that will be rehabilitated under this order. So we're getting there. We're almost there, I should say. Questions? Should I go on?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if there were any questions. The next is the 2018 well improvements for the Linwood and Cedar Hill wells. This project consists of drilling replacement wells for the Linwood and Cedar Hill number 3, 4 facilities. We'd abandon and cap the existing wells, testing and well production. These existing wells have been out of service since 2005 and 2006. Together, they represent a daily capacity in excess of 1 million gallons of daily production. And the existing wells must be abandoned by January 15, 2019, again under a US EPA order. This was the 3rd time we had gone out to bid for this. Previously, the other 2 times, the proposals came in above the engineer's estimate. Since this last bid, the engineer of record has investigated the factors and has determined that the price bid by the bidder this time, which we received one bid, was within approximate market conditions, and it's 6% less than the last bid. So it's an amount of $392,000. That includes a $50,000 allowance for any unforeseen field conditions. So the net price is $342,000. So this is in various accounts, and so it is fully funded through the water utility.
Questions?
Okay.
Questions? No? Okay.
Okay. The next one is the purchase of the Elks Club. This we're just bringing back one more time. We're going to hopefully consider it for approval at next week's meeting. So at this time, I just thought we'd bring it back one more time if there were any additional questions or concerns about that purchase. This, again, as a reminder, is for the headquarters of Ridgewood Water. We would be able to bring those who are in our water area at Wharton Dyke and Midland Park here to Ridgewood. So we'd have administration as well as the crew at Wharton Dyke, as well as Glen Avenue, all in Ridgewood. So we wouldn't let go of the property in Midland Park. However, we would not have staffing there any longer. And we would also be able to bring, I believe, our chemists and our lab people here to Ridgewood, which right now they are not. So.
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I do. So, just for the public's edification, the Ridgewood Elks Club is being purchased solely for the water utility. We had an appraisal done. We are purchasing it for $200,000 more than the appraisal. So the appraisal was lower than what we're paying for it. We also have to put an additional $1.5 million into it to renovate. I think the total cost was about $3 million to renovate it. There is a plentiful amount of Class A and Class B office space throughout this northern New Jersey region. I don't feel we should be buying the Elks Club to house 30 employees. I think it's a bad move on our part. I think that with some of the conversations we've had in closed session regarding the water company, I still think this is probably not a smart idea for us to do at this time. So, just my comment for the record.
Yeah, I have some additional concerns. The space is going to be vacated by the water department. What are we going to be doing with that space? In other words, there's going to be space in the village hall. It's going to be vacated. Do we have a plan for that? And is that part of the cost of this, or is this going to show up, a year down the road that we got to renovate this particular area over here for, I don't know, the police department? And that would be a concern of mine. It would be nice to know what the all-in is of doing this, and the ramifications of the things that happen, as byproducts of it. So my concern is I don't think we really have a good handle on the overall costs of all of this, and it makes me concerned and makes me not inclined to want to, not to be in favor of it. So, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify. I don't think there was ever any discussion about $3 million worth of renovations. I think the number that was included was $500,000 for the renovations for that. So I mean, I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember that $3 million number coming up at any time.
There wasn't a specific number. It was more in the thought process was in the range of 500, 700,000, but. I don't recall.
I disagree. There was specifically
okay.
in closed session, we talked about $1.5 million number of renovation, and that's where we came up with that initial.
I don't ever recall.
I'd love it if it was 500, but.
I don't recall that number, and my recollection is 500. But nonetheless, I just want to point out that not only am I very supportive of this, I think that consolidating and the efficiencies that will result in this will be incredibly beneficial. And for some of my council colleagues who have never had the opportunity to review the footprint study and the deficiencies we have in this village hall for our own day-to-day operations, this frees up that space, and at some point down the road that will have to be calculated as to who's going to get that space and how that will play into those allocations. I also see this as hugely beneficial, and one of the things I'm most excited about with the Elks Club, and I go back to Pam Perrin earlier, her comments about water conservation and the League of Women Voters, and how many educational programs we have put together, organized, and presented to the public, and this is really an opportunity to have a hands-on conservation program right there in the Elks Club, right there in the new home of Ridgewood Water, and it's a terrific opportunity for water conservation and the future of Ridgewood Water, so I appreciate all the work on this.
Can we, since the delta is significant between what some of us think what the cost will be.
I can check and see what those numbers are.
For the benefit of clarity, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Yes, I can do so. Also, the other thing I didn't mention was this is the last contiguous piece of property, other than residential property, for this municipal campus. And so it would allow us to expand this municipal campus to the Elks Club property, and that is an advantage certainly in the fact that, it won't be developed in other ways. It will be used for public purposes.
So let me just add to that one. It's for the water utility. It's not for any other village business. So just so everybody's clear, it's for the water utility.
It's for the water
utility.
utility.
Sharing of,
correct. Yeah. It is, but it's still a public purpose.
Next.
Okay. So the next one is revisions to the valet parking ordinance. There are some minor changes proposed to the valet parking ordinance. One is that the police department will have the ability to check driver's licenses of the valets. The other is requiring valet operators to cover the signage for the loading zones when they are not in use, and if they wish to use valet parking prior to 3 p.m., they should seek written permission from the village manager. Requiring valet operators to keep a log of employees and their driver's licenses and have this available to the police department for review, and also prohibiting valet parking operating from charging the public for using their service. So those are the minor changes for this ordinance.
Questions?
Yeah, I'll talk about it in my committee report, but I had my first chamber meeting this morning. Oh. It was very exciting. And as you can expect, valet and parking and the garage were all topics of conversation. But the one of the major conversations, or the main conversations in talking about valets, what is the master plan of valets? Because there was one property owner that contended that Roots has cost, their valet has cost them almost $40,000 in business. Another one contended that it basically dried up the majority of their business because of the parking and the lack of parking for their businesses. So they asked that I come back and talk to my council colleagues about what is the whole plan. Some of them had just found out about the proposal for the steel wheel in front of Steel Wheel, and they were opposed to that. Some were for it. So I guess really, and I think it was mentioned by somebody, I'm not sure who, at the last meeting, that there has to be a master plan for valet because we have to be fair across the board. So I don't know how we start that conversation, if it's part of this. Not really sure where we go.
Yeah, to that point, there was a lot of concerns raised at the CBD Advisory Committee. Obviously, some of the people you heard from, same overlap. But I think it's important to really go out and survey all the businesses, because we're hearing from a handful of people who understandably have suffered because of this, but we need to understand, so I mean, that goes to the impact. We need to understand is what would work better for everyone. I think now, obviously, only a certain handful of businesses are benefiting from it, but how can we think about coming up with a plan that would benefit everyone? Yeah. And that's something that we'll discuss tomorrow at CBDAC and hopefully come up with some good ideas.
Okay, this ordinance, though, is for these minor changes, which I think are important for our existing valleys, which we do have 2, which is Roots and Park West. So I just want to make sure everyone's okay with introducing this ordinance so that we can move forward, because I think they're important. Okay. Okay. The next one is concerning Overbrook Road parking. So Overbrook Road between North Van Deen and Northern Parkway is basically on the weekends and in the evenings due to sports practices. It's become very congested. People are driving quickly to get athletes to their fields. Right now, there's parking on both sides of Overbrook, so it creates a narrow corridor. So if there are two big SUVs that are parked across from each other, it's very narrow, and there's a concern that perhaps it's not large enough for an emergency vehicle to fit down that street. So they are, well, one individual actually is recommending that there be parking on one side of Overbrook only and then no parking on the other side. I also attached something from Sergeant Chuck and Chris Retheshauser, our engineer, and basically, obviously, if a street is more congested, the cars are moving more slowly, usually, because it is more narrow. It's a possibility we could look at using Herman's Place as a pick-up, drop-off for Stevens Field. Yeah, we could have a no stop and standing instead of a no parking. I think my recommendation would be to go out to the neighborhood and say this is what's being proposed. If you're in agreement that it be one side no parking, and then have the neighbors weigh in. Because although the individual who sent this email may be very in favor of it, we don't know what the other neighbors feel. And as we found, whenever we enact parking regulations, this affects service people who come to the houses, including plumbers, electricians, home health aides, and they don't take that into account when they say, yes, this is what we want, and then, or even the residents themselves, and then they end up getting ticketed because they're in front of the area where there's no parking. So what I want the council to do is discuss if you're in favor of this. If so, what we'll do is we'll go out and mail them a survey and then see what the consensus is.
So I just want to say, having had the correspondence with this resident, having corresponded with him, and having experienced on Overbrook specifically that cars are pulling into the nooks of driveways to allow other vehicles to pass, and it's just this very narrow corridor, and it's dangerous. It's a little nerve-wracking because somebody's all the way at the end of Overbrook and you can't get up the street, and it's impossible. Two cars can't pass, and it's probably dangerous as well because there's not enough room for people to get in and out of their cars when they're parked there. So, but I agree. I think we have to do a public outreach to that neighborhood and just see what everyone's interested in so that we don't wind up in a situation where everybody says, hey, you took away my parking again. So that would be a disaster. And I actually had a thought that, I don't know if it's worthwhile looking at, maybe putting together a couple of residents from each of those area streets as almost like a think tank ad hoc to think through these issues. And I don't know if maybe our resident would be interested in doing that as well. It's just a thought, just to get everybody's feedback and then do the outreach to the public.
So Heather, the intention is to send a survey out to Overbrook and the surrounding streets?
No, Overbrook.
Just Overbrook?
Yes, to see if they're in favor. But I need to know, is the council in favor of doing one side no parking and one side parking?
I think the first step is serving not only Overbrook, but remember, I can't help but to think about what happened with Palm End Walk.
Yeah.
We pushed one Palm to the other side of Godwin into Sherman Place.
Most of
best suited to talk to everybody in the surrounding area.
Most of the surrounding streets have no parking, both sides.
So what's going to happen with that overflow? Where are they going?
And that's what Sergeant Chuck had indicated when he responded, is that you push it further and further out. And right now Overbrook is the street that allows the parking.
Yeah.
So that's why they're on there. So it'll be the next street closest to Overbrook probably where that'll happen. So certainly, if there's one side parking, that may allow some to park and others not to. And then in addition, we could explore possibly, because the Board of Ed, we've determined, owns Herman's Place, but it's possible that they may allow that for a pickup and drop-off for Stevens Field, I don't know. But we could certainly explore that with Board of Ed.
Would North Irving work well if we do one side of street parking?
Yeah, that was the original cause.
Yeah, so the mayor's point, I'm wondering if, I don't know what the surrounding streets are as far as parking.
We can give you a...
We should probably incorporate some of those comments from those people as well.
Okay, well, like I said, I think most of the surrounding streets don't have parking, which is why they're parking on Overbrook. But what we can do is we can do a map and we can show you what the parking situation is on those streets, and we're going to have to bring it back in August anyway. In the meantime, you know, we can survey the neighborhood, but I want to know what we're going to say in the survey. So that's what I'm asking.
I think it's given them the options of eliminating parking on one side of the street. And then I guess we could potentially look at some of the side streets in the area that could handle one side of the street parking as well.
So, you know, the Palmander thing is when that happened, all parking was eliminated. So in this, and so what happened in that instance is Sherman?
Sherman.
So Sherman, all those vehicles that had previously parked on Palmander were no longer permitted to, and they all shifted. But in this instance, it's a little bit different because we're not saying no parking at all. But I think it's important that that we strike the balance to everyone kind of shouldering the same burden. And it's unfortunately when people live in the vicinity of the parks, this is, you know, the good and the bad, and this is a tough one. But I have to say, just from my own experience, it's impossible. It's very bad. So we'll redo the outreach. Yes.
Yeah, I would strongly suggest going out to everybody on Overbrook, because given past experiences, when we enact changes to parking, you maybe find out that some people want it and most people don't, or, you know, I just want to give everybody the opportunity to make any kind of suggestions or give their thoughts on the situation.
Okay.
Else?
All right. So the next item we're going to discuss is parking meter rates, hours, and kiosks. I'm going to have Mr. Rooney come up just because he is our parking utility director. So I had, as Deputy Mayor Knudsen had indicated when we introduced the bond ordinance for the parking garage on our reorganization, she had indicated that she wanted to have a funding mechanism in place so that it could be paid for through the parking utility, which was the goal, obviously. So Mr. Rooney, myself, Chief Luckey, Captain Lyons, Jim O'Connell of our Signal Division, and Sergeant Chuck, we met and we discussed the various options. And in speaking with the police department as well as traffic and signal, since they're going to have to change the meters, we determined the recommendation that came from that group discussion was the meter hour should be 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and 75 cents an hour on all meters. There should be 4 additional parking kiosks, 2 kiosks being placed in the Cottage Place lot. So they would be placed at the entrances. So the one would be as the entrance from East Ridgewood Avenue, and the other one would be the entrance from Cottage Place. This would allow us to see how the kiosk operates in 2 park mobile zones, because right now it's in Chestnut, but Chestnut is all 1 park mobile zone. The other location for the kiosk, we had thought originally when we discussed it that it would be at the top of East Ridgewood Avenue between Broad and Chestnut. They had recommended it be on North Broad Street. It's many more spaces, and it would allow us to see exactly how it works on a longer stretch of street. And so the thought was that the kiosks would be placed mid-block, and that they would then have stickers on them indicating this way to the kiosk so people aren't looking. And plus we'll have one of those P parking things that indicate where kiosks are, and so that would be helpful. We would be removing then the parking meter heads from Cottage Place as well as from North Broad Street. As a reminder, the kiosks do accept cash or credit card, and then also you can use Park Mobile as well. So basically that was what the recommendation came from this group. The plan, if the council agrees, is to introduce the bond ordinance, the meters and hour ordinance at the public meeting next week, and then have it be adopted in August, and then it would be effective September 4th, which is the day after Labor Day. So this way it would be in place and a funding mechanism could begin, and also it would allow us to move forward. There is another piece of this, which is the Walker report, but why don't we talk about this first, and then we can talk about the Walker report.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Is there this seems to be working well in Chestnut, which is why we're expanding it. So is the overall plan still that eventually we're going to just move the kiosks throughout the village? And how long might do you anticipate that taking?
So my proposal is to go another 6 months. This test would be even better than Chestnut, because Chestnut I had no other options other than Park Mobile. Now we'll put them on the streets and in the lots, and we'll see how they're received. If things work out, then this would be something we'd move forward with.
Okay. I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
I'm just glad we moved it to North Broad, because when I realized there were only that handful of parking spaces up at the top, it was kind of funny. It was like for what? But I think this is a much better plan than what we had kind of hashed through in our meeting. So, yeah, I'm good. I think this is, it's important to have this funding mechanism in place, because we need to know where the money's coming from and that it's a good source. And I think the kiosks are brilliant. We know that we're 20% up in Chestnut, and we anticipate that that will be added revenue as well. So it's good. Oh, wait, I do have one more question. So on where the meters are left, the meter heads are left. Now, I recall that at one point when we changed some meter, increased the meter prices, we had a problem with the cups that couldn't hold in, because you're almost, in this instance, you're increasing the number of coins. The last time I think we doubled the coins, so we had a problem because they were filling up, and so that was causing jams.
I did ask that question, and he said it should be fine. The existing cups should be fine.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Perfect.
Along with the changing the rates on the meters, we have the ability to do that pretty quickly.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to go back to my chamber meeting this morning, and we had a lively discussion about this as well, and I hope that everybody is watching from the chamber, because I got it from them and gave it back equally, so that there was an equal conversation about this. And they wanted me to relay that they are opposed to increasing the meter rates at this time. They had a strong concern that, and it is a concern that we have had for quite a long time, that other shop owners are not having their employees park in the employee spots. And it is causing the challenges on the major arteries where you park in front of the buildings. And I said, well, then the only way to solve that is even stricter enforcement. And I see the chief here, they wanted me to invite the chief and the village manager to the next meeting, because they said they are at the point where they feel that strict enforcement will fill the coffers quicker than an extra quarter per hour if everybody is ticketed on time and gets pushed to the lots. So, I said to them, listen, we've talked about it. We made all the employee parking for you. We gave them 25 cents an hour, and it sat vacant, and we, bore the brunt of all the empty spots. So I'm bringing the conversation here. They are fully supportive of full enforcement on a regular basis. They are opposed to us increasing the meter rates at this time. So, I don't know if anybody has comments to this. I know that it has been a struggle for us because we did this for them. And by them, I mean every business that has employees that could have parked in these lots.
but they felt that a joint message from the council and the chamber that will go out to all of the members of the chamber and all of the shop owners, property owners, that there's going to be strict enforcement. They felt that that would probably do better than raising the rate a quarter and letting people, sit in the spot on the street.
So I'm actually shocked that that was the position, because we've had the discussion numerous times at the chamber. The idea of parking enforcement as a way to fill the coffers is a bit silly, because, the understanding all along, and we've had the discussion many times, is that there will be a need to raise the meter rates to pay for a garage, not to be punitive or fill the village's coffers. The pushback that I've heard from the chamber has been, and I'm sure this is what the pushback you got today, was that we need to get tougher on enforcement in order to keep the employees off the street and into the lots. The problem with enforcement is it's a double-edged sword. If you enforce even more aggressively than we are now, we then run the danger of pushing people out of town who we want to come into town to shop. I never heard anything from the chamber of getting tough on employees to say, hey, listen, stay out of the lots. I mean, go into the lots, stay off the streets. And I think part of what's missing here, in terms of those incentives, and look, at one point in time, we set aside 60 parking spaces at 50% of the cost of what it will cost to park on the street without any 3-hour restriction. They could park there all day, and they didn't take that offer. But I think in general, there has to be a parking pricing differential between on-street parking spots. I think we had the discussion in the meeting that we had, and those on the lots. So the on-street parking spots are the premium spots. They should command a higher price, and then look for ways to make the parking spots in the lots a bit cheaper. But the idea that we don't raise the rates, that we just start enforcing more in order to finance a $12 million bond is crazy.
The other topic that came up that I was not aware of, they said that it's the same offenders, which we all know it's usually the same offenders, that if they pay by e-ticket, there's no escalation so they pay.
Chief?
The chief wants to come up for this one. I think you were mentioned.
So there are some people that have been gaming the system.
Yeah.
Because we have gone to the electronic ticketing, if you pay it within the same day of you getting it, it's before it goes into the court's system to hit the higher fines to know that it's progressive. So there are some people that have gotten multiple first tickets, and some of them we have actually caught. They've hit the 10th, 11th, and 12th that they really are, but it's with the new system, and that's where the issues come into play.
Yeah, so that was the other topic that came up, that they've figured how to game the system. They get the ticket, they pay the ticket, they leave the car, or they park there the next day, and it's like this unending, challenge. And I said, listen, we would like nothing more than to get the message out to all of the employees and to all of the shop owners that you should have your employees, it's for your business, for everybody's business, in the lots, if they're there for long terms. If they're coming in and doing a 1-hour shift, they should still be there, because your customers are the most important thing. You want them to have ease of use. And they reiterated, and maybe one of them will run down here if they're watching, that they felt that the employees are some of the worst offenders of parking on the street with repeat parking. So that's what they meant by they were saying, you know what, if you can get all these employees into those lots, and they're the ones that get ticketed, and they start feeling the burn a little bit, then you're going to have more parking on the street, and you're going to have,
Well, can I just ask you a question? Did I understand you to say that some have gotten 10, 11, 12 tickets when you finally caught them?
Correct.
Okay, so then it's not enforcement. This is just a blatant disregard for rules. It's not an enforcement issue. They don't care. So we are enforcing if somebody got 10, 11, 12, 13 tickets. Personally, I have to say, we have been doing this since before 2015. And every single time the chamber representatives have come here and stated, increase the meter rates, extend the hours to build the garage. They have understood this all along. And now when we're at the 11th hour and said, put this funding mechanism in place so that if we don't have the funding mechanism in place and we don't make that money in the parking utility, then that's going to have to come out of the taxpayer coffers. You cannot go back to the taxpayers if you don't have a vote on the bond, which, by the way, was defeated already June 21st, 2016. So what's going to happen is it's going to come out of our regular budget, and that means a cut in services to our residents. They understood this all along going in. They pushed and pushed and pushed for a garage, and now it's our job, it's our duty, it's our obligation to protect the village taxpayers by increasing the meter rates and extending the hours. And we are enforcing, and I appreciate that 10, 11, 12. And I also, by the way, think that those people that are a theft of service by using those parking spaces and waiting until the parking enforcement officer is in the vicinity, that we should put into place an ordinance that really nails those people, because that's a theft. So I think that we have to continue with this and get this done once and for all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really shocked that somebody from the chamber and that the Chamber of Commerce would come out and say that they're opposed to meter rates, because this is, as Deputy Mayor Knutson just said, we've been talking about this since 2014. It's nothing new. It's been going on for 4+ years now, and there's no other. We can't afford it. We can't pay for a garage if we don't raise the rates. That's really just. That's all there is to it. And the thing with the employees, again, I have to agree with Councilwoman Walsh. We bent over backwards for the employees. We gave them 60. We cut the rates to 25 cents an hour. We had to take parking spaces back because nobody was using them. And again, Cottage Place, they're empty. So my thought is keep the lots, keep the garage at 50 cents an hour, and raise the meter rates to $1 on the street. Because we've dangled the carrot out and we've tried to give everybody an opportunity to take advantage of discount parking, to give them dedicated parking, and there seems to be this problem with employees parking on the streets all the time. So my proposal is raise it to $1 on the streets and keep the lots at 50 cents, and it's got to at least take some of the pressure off, and some of the people might actually use some of these spots that we've allocated for them.
So why are we penalizing the shoppers who visit downtown by charging now $1 for the meters, and still the employees that are using the lots, that are not using the lots when we gave it to them for what, a quarter? They're not using it for a quarter. Why wouldn't we just say, you know what, we're going to go either $1 throughout or 75 cents throughout, whatever it is, fair is fair. When somebody parks on the street, they don't, I just think that the parking space is the parking space. If somebody's going to pay for 13 tickets, they're not going to care whether it's 50 cents, 75 cents, or $1. And by the way, if they don't want the meter rates raised, then maybe they want to engage in a business improvement district and everyone pony up the money out of the businesses. Let them do it, because this is just, it's so incredibly frustrating to hear this at this point.
I mean, the usual argument has always been between the retailers and the restaurants when it comes to extension of the meter hours. Retailers say, hey, why am I penalized? Meters run the hours that I'm open, 10 to 6, and when the town comes alive at night, the restaurants get free parking for their customers. That was always, I thought that's where you were going. So I'm really shocked that
No, and I'll just say this, like I said, it was a very lively discussion because there has to be a happy medium. Obviously, the chamber does a wonderful service for the village. We wouldn't have a downtown, but for the chamber members and all of the people that run the shops in town. I said I was more than happy to talk to the shop owners and businesses that were maybe the worst offenders and express to them the need and help themselves get into the lots or get their people into the lots. But, I did say that the meter rate increase was to go to the parking utility to pay for the garage, and that we are committed. We have a timeline. If all goes well, we will have a garage November, I think it was November of next year. So we're moving ahead. Yes, these are problems that we can deal with. We can talk to the police department about even more enforcement if that's what they want. But this is all part of this whole big puzzle of you can't have this without that. And, like I said, and we talk about it, citizen safety. I don't know if Martin is still here. We talk about changing behavior all the time, and the behavior has to change. The bad driver behavior has to change. The bad parker behavior has to change. So, I'm willing, the council's willing to put into this. So, and CBDAC, they mentioned CBDAC. So, that's the plan going forward.
Councilman Boyd?
Thank you. One question I have is, are we going to be educating the public as to the effective dates of this so they know ahead of time, rather than them showing up on September 4th?
Yes, we will. We'll do it through e-notice, we'll put it on the website, we'll try to get something in the newspapers, so, and in social media as well.
Okay.
So this way they'll be well aware.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with several of the other council people on differential pricing. And I don't know, and this may be too late to do this, but places that are closer to the train station should be priced higher, and as you move further away east, they should be less. I don't know if that's doable or not, and if Walker can look at that as a possibility to encourage people to kind of park away from the congested areas. The North Walnut Street is still going to be for employees at 25 cents an hour, is that right? Yeah, that's not going to change?
No, that's going to, no. I think we made it all 50 cents. I think it's all going to be 75.
Oh, everything's going to be 70,
right.
Including the employee?
Yes, they can still purchase the hang tags for CBD employees.
So they'll park in those spaces, but they can park for 8 hours, but it'll be 75 cents. Ooh, I don't know if that's, that's a...
I guess, the point is, and it's not just to incentivize the employees to move into the lots, but also for shoppers and diners. You're going to be willing to pay a higher price to park on the street, or you park on the lot. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, just a couple more on, so the kiosks, the plan is that when are they going to be up and running again? I don't remember.
They'll all be up by September 1st.
The kiosks?
Yes,
really?
That's what we're trying to do, have it all effective.
That's good. Great. Yeah, it was very exciting. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much.
Bob, a question. I know that we're waiting, we're engaging Walker again through the recommendation of Acacia Financial, our financial advisor that we've retained for the funding of the garage. Can you walk us through what are those different scenarios that Walker will be kind of bringing back to us? Do you have a list that you can share with us?
Sure. So last time we spoke, Acacia came back with 6 financing scenarios as far as the debt service and how it would be structured during the life of the bonds. Mm-hmm. So of that 6, we picked 4 that we felt the direction that we would take. One would be, say, capitalized interest for 1 year. One would be deferring principal for 1 or 2 years. Another would be flat debt service consistent all the way through. The other one, if I'm not mistaken, is lower principal initially, higher principal at the end. So we came up with 4 scenarios. So we went to Walker and said, we have these different, and we had a conference call on this, we have these 4 scenarios that we need you to build into your projections. Okay, and they said, fine. The other thing we asked them to do was to take a look at the rate structures. So if we go forward with a flat rate to 75 cents starting in September, they would then incorporate that, and they would determine on another scenario if we did on-street higher and lots lower. If we did certain sections, as you suggested, core area higher, external lower. So these are the type of factors that we're asking them to incorporate so we can see what the impact would be. The last thing we asked them to build in was a capital maintenance reserve, so that after 5 years we're starting to bank some money for the maintenance of the garage to keep it in good condition so we get that 50-year life that the engineers think we can achieve. So these are different factors that I'm proposing that we've asked them to do. They came back with a quote.
So, Bob, I have one other question on the kiosks. My understanding is the kiosk is when you pay whatever, and let's say it's for an hour, and you leave after a half an hour. The new person who comes into that spot has to pay. They don't get the remainder.
That's correct.
Yeah. So So when we're looking at that from the Walker report, I'm assuming that the whole downtown's going to be kiosks, right, at some point? So there's got to be some incremental revenue from that. Will Walker look at that as well, or?
We'll ask them to incorporate that. Unfortunately, we don't have much of a history. It's only a short term that we see the increase, and we don't have a comparison because Chestnut didn't have meters before. It just had Park Mobile. So I think, we can ask them to build in a factor that says, all right, with the kiosk, we're going to get additional 1%, 2%, to be conservative.
Yeah.
We can certainly throw that out and ask them to look at that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we don't have the history, but other municipalities, cities like Hoboken, for example, that have used the kiosks now for quite some time, what they find is when they do the comparisons, before the kiosks were installed, after they were installed, it's about a 20% increase in revenues.
Wow, that's great.
Because of that, because you're not giving away that free parking with the meter that's still running with time in it.
Plus, if they're using Park Mobile, they're incurring 35 cents on top of that already. So if they use a credit card, it's, a win.
Yeah. And convenient, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could just say, the thought was that we know there needs to be an increase, so we figured if we did 75 cents across the board now, have it be effective in September, then have Walker come back with the report, looking at these different scenarios, street versus lot versus core versus, all these different things. Then we could then determine possibly for January or, even later, whatever you decide, the council, as to when you want to increase the rates again and how we would do it. But this way, at least we'd have our foot in the door. We'd start with the increased hours, the increased rates throughout everywhere, and then we can determine what to do from there after Walker.
And by the way, if we're talking about increases in September, this only puts us 2 months off the mark from the initial recommendation from the Walker report, the report that we received in February, that we start the increases in July.
Yep.
So from a timeline perspective, we're not losing that much time, and we've actually not added more significant time for the time that we have Epic and delivered a completed garage to us. So.
Correct.
And they had recommended 75 cents for July.
75,
so
right.
You're right, we're only 2 months off.
Yep.
And so the second part of it was the Walker report. So in order for us to do that, it's $16,400 for them to do that part of the report. That includes $1,000 in expenses. So that's a not to exceed number. They may or may not use that much in expenses. So that would be a resolution for us to adopt next week as well.
Yep.
When do we get the Walker report, the revised one?
Probably around September, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay.
That would be the plan. We're looking to try and get them to give me some type of draft by August 1st.
Yep.
So we're trying to work that out, but hopefully I'll have something by mid-August to present.
All right, moving on.
Okay, so the next one is the SHPO determination on the train station parking lot. We do have the sketch on the monitors. SHPO did get back to us, State Historic Preservation Office, and they indicated that the Ridgewood train station is individually listed in the New Jersey Register of Historic Places and the National Register of Historic Places. The proposed project will add approximately 35 additional parking spaces and reduce the width of the landscape center island. This was an original feature of the train station complex and referred to as a park in historic maps. However, it has been significantly altered over the years. So we gave 3 different options. They preferred, SHPO preferred option number 2, which depicts a landscape center island 14 feet wide with a straight centered sidewalk lined with trees with a darker gray concrete finish with 7 supplemental light posts. SHPO finds that this is the most compatible with the historic Ridgewood Railroad Station site. It retains more of the island. The darker finish of the sidewalk diminishes its appearance and is therefore preferable as there was no sidewalk originally. Finally, option 2 proposes to install a line of lamp posts along the perimeter of the island evocative of the original design of the landscaped area. Therefore, they indicate that the application for project authorization for the Ridgewood train station landscape reconfiguration is in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, and the application does not constitute an encroachment on this historic property.
Questions, comments? Councilman Seaton?
I'm ready to move forward on this. We've been waiting months and months and months to hear from it, and it still maintains a safe passage for people to get to the train station. It's an active lot, and it's additional parking. It actually adds back, I think, most of the parking that was taken away when it was reallocated to shoppers and diners from Hudson Street. So,
Deputy Mayor?
So I just actually want to thank Chris for all this work, and I know it was a lot of back and forth with SHPO. It's fascinating to learn that the existing walkway was never approved by SHPO, and that this is more compatible with what the expectation would be from a historic perspective, and this is most appropriate. So I think that we got this one right, and it looks really terrific, and I'm glad I see some benches in there as well. And so I think that that answers the question. Do you want to come up at all?
I'd also like to thank Mr. Rajasauser for his work, because it was, as Deputy Mayor Knudsen pointed out, a lot of back and forth and a lot of additional information they needed in order to make this determination.
thank you, Chris.
So happy. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think this gives new meaning to the phrase, the wheels of government move slowly, because this was painfully slow through no fault of our village engineer.
Thanks, Chris.
Right.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just handed out the sketch that's also up on the screens for your perusal. We've done a very preliminary estimate on what it will cost to construct option 2 that was selected by State Historic Preservation Office, and we come up with a number of about $300,000. That gains us, I have to correct Heather slightly, it gains us approximately 38 spaces. In keeping with some of the earlier discussions with the council, I think, Mayor, you were very upfront with the desire for a wider parking spot, so we maintained our standard width of 9 feet for the parking spots along the island. We did shorten the depth by 2 feet. So they are considered compact spaces, but you do have the width from space to space to open the doors up more comfortably and hopefully minimize assaulting the car parked next to you with your door. We also are looking at, as the Deputy Mayor said, we have a walkway. We're going to put in a couple benches. We've talked to the age-friendly organization. They were very good in keeping their population's needs and how they walk about the village in our minds when we designed this. They very much needed a way to traverse from the train station building to the sidewalk to go, say, to the bagel shop, or to go further to Godwin Avenue to Whole Foods. The 3 options that we presented to SHPO each had a sidewalk in some configuration. The one they approved is the one where we're going to have to tint the concrete to as dark color as possible. An effect of that tinting of the concrete is our concern for pedestrians, so they did approve us putting in lighting. Because that way, if it was just a dark concrete walkway with no lighting, we had some concerns that people might not see where they had to go. And we don't want them to wander off the sidewalk. We want to keep them on the path, cross at the crosswalks, and proceed on their ways. If there's any questions from the council, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
I just have one quick question. And the color, I know we had this conversation and let SHPO pick the colors of the concrete. So it's not orange. That's not historically appropriate. So it's not that clay color.
Yeah, they felt that the sidewalk that currently is up there that meanders and was installed as part of the New Jersey Transit high-level platforms is not an appropriate color.
Right.
As you said earlier in the meeting, SHPO seemed kind of surprised what was constructed there, although I do know that Transit had a historic specialist on their team that was supposed to interface with SHPO. I don't know why there is that disconnect, but we have what we have there, and we now finally have, after, as Councilman Seaton said, a lengthy period of time, an approval to go forward.
Good, great.
And then in option 3 was the one that narrowed it to about 9 feet. Option 2 narrows it down to 14 feet. Is that correct?
Yeah, option, I don't remember exactly what each option was. One option was a narrow walkway without lighting, but standard white concrete. The third option also had us making a sloped ramp down to the Garber Square sidewalk and not having any sidewalk in that middle island. I'm glad they didn't select that, because I would like the sidewalk in the island, not just for people walking through there, but also for the people using that, to use that as a refuge point, as we have the islands here in the Village Hall parking lot.
Councilman Walsh?
So, thank you, Chris, for this design. I'll just comment, as you know, Citizen Safety wanted to get a look at this as well, but since we had our last meeting and their next meeting isn't for a few weeks, I'll ask that you maybe send it to the chairman so that he can send it out to all the members.
Well, I'll do that.
Yeah. As you all know, I'm a commuter, so my biggest concern always is adding more cars to an already congested lot. So we're adding essentially 38 cars to this lot. The configuration's a little bit different. Obviously, you're going from slant to straight spots, which I think is supposed to be a safer slant, actually. When you have two slants coming back at each other, it's not as safe as two straights. Correct?
Do we call those angle spaces?
Yeah.
We don't call them slanted spaces.
Okay.
But that's terminology. Yeah, 90-degree spaces. An angle space is easier to pull in and out, but that very action of making it easier to pull in and out at times makes the motorist or the driver a little bit sloppy and not looking over their shoulder. Turning into a 90-degree space is a more deliberate motion. Generally, most people have to slow down and take more care to execute it neatly.
Yeah. So obviously this is going to be a traffic pattern change because, you know, everybody's used to, again, talking about behavior, everybody's used to parking a certain way, getting out a certain way. There are people who double park along there waiting to pick people up. So it looks like this is going to be a little less wide in the center there where those cars tend to double park.
We still have the aisles that circulate around are 22 feet wide, literally, say, two 11-foot lanes. So if people are still going to stage to pick up a spouse or a loved one, they'll still be able to do it if they pull along to either side, right or left. Hopefully they'll pull to the right side so people will pass on the left. We did not change the configuration very much at all from the end of the island to the train station, where usually you'll find 3 or 4 cars waiting, as I said, for a spouse or a loved one.
Yeah. And what are the markings that are going to be on the actual road? Are there going to be these arrows, or like what is going to be, because of the way that you have this entrance or exit and entrance, ingress and egress here, I'm hoping that people aren't going to think, oh, because that's moved, I can back up and go the other way, because you do have a solid line there that, to me, looks like it could be two-way traffic.
We're going to have the circulation arrows applied on the ground. We can also put up a couple of one-way signs at the tail ends of the island to show motorists which way to go. As you circulate around, at that location, there can be by the inside a do not enter sign to again advise the motorists that they should continue straight northward and then make the loop around and not just make an immediate left.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, once you change the patterns, and if there's anybody new, most of the people that are used to it are going to know what to do, but just because of the changes in these other sections there, I think, and I'll just be honest, nobody ever uses the walkway. I've never seen anybody use the walkway.
Age-friendly says their population uses it frequently and often.
They must go during the day then.
Very likely during the day.
Some days, but during the week, I don't think I've ever seen anybody walk on a walkway.
It's important to have a walkway, though.
No, I know,
Yeah,
but I'm
I
just
think it's
saying.
important. Anyway, you know what it's going to be, because the lighting's there, it's going to add a very different feeling to it. So it'll probably be used more, maybe people will sit on those benches.
Councilman Boyd?
Thank you. So, Chris, the number of trees you have here, are we adding or taking away from the trees? I know on the kind of the center aisle we have 7. We have 7 now, and there's only 5.
We have approximately 15 deciduous trees at the present.
Yeah.
They're going to be removed. Most of them are in extremely poor health. We did have an analysis done on the trees by our arborist. I think only 1 or 2 trees was considered viable. We are planting along the island and along the western side. We're going to be planting red oaks, because that's the tree that was shown in some of the historical drawings that have been planted in that location. There are some remnant oak trees there, but they're at the end of their lifespan.
Okay. And then, how are you going to restrict larger cars from parking in the compact spaces?
At some point in time when this is built or before it's finished, I'll be presenting an ordinance to the council to make it a violation should you park a certain size car in the compact space. The only difference between the compact space and our regular space is 2 foot of depth.
Okay.
They have the same width, 9 feet wide. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that was from earlier presentations to you folks.
And then, I'm assuming to Councilman Walsh's point, there's going to be some kind of a traffic assessment. I would imagine, you know, at the high times, people coming in, or actually people leaving, you know, at the high times coming back, it's going to be a bit messy there, I would guess, for a period of time. And you may get some people frustrated sitting in the parking lot for, you know, depending on how long the light is. So would there be a traffic assessment with this?
We anticipate there'll be a learning curve, but what we have found from previous studies at the train station, the user base is pretty consistent. Years past, I had done 2 surveys on whether the train station commuters wanted to switch to a pay-by-space meter or pay-and-display meter, and I was personally astonished how many residents that used that facility at that time were very much in favor of maintaining the status quo of feeding the meter with quarters. They had expressed that anything such as standing at a meter, waiting for the person in front of them or several people in front of them to pay would possibly cause them to miss their train. The residents that used this lot at that time had gotten their commute down practically to the second, knowing when the train comes in, knowing how long it took for them to feed the quarters into the parking meter and how long it took them to get from a space to the platform to get into the train. They did not want anything that could possibly add time to that or impede them on that. So we know that there'll be some learning curve, but we have a steady user base here. Granted, with the additional spaces, it'll become a larger user base. I think they'll adapt very quickly.
And then, so the parking here is going to be for commuters all day. It'll essentially, it'll
Yes.
either be tags, hang tags, or it'll be
hang tags or pay the meter. Again, unless the council decides that other parking users could utilize those spaces. But again, that's a decision in your hands.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add to that. It's not necessarily a commuter. It could be somebody who's going into Hoboken for lunch to meet a friend, but is a resident with a resident sticker.
Right.
It could be anybody.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be a commuter. Right.
As long as they comply with the governing regulations to lot, we really don't care if they go south on a train or go north on a train. They might go to Suffolk for lunch. There's a brew pub up there.
So I have a question. How long does this project take from start to finish?
We don't know that yet. We don't have a firm answer. We'd like to present this to our current paving contractor. This year we have an excellent, really excellent concrete sub who's been working in the village and has a very large crew and is just knocking the work out tremendously. We'd like to ask them if they want to do this. In that case, if that is the case, we would discuss with Heather a change order, certainly approved by the council. That would be the most expeditious way to get this built. If we were to bid it out, it would be probably in the latter part of fall that the construction would take place.
But if we wanted to take the more expeditious route, that would be beneficial because this is really the time to do this project. This is, in terms of timing, this is really the time to do it.
Yes, I know from talking to our inspector that's been watching the work, the curb guy's got to go to Belleville mid-August. We're going to keep him busy until then. I want to see what our work is, what the work program we have scheduled for him is, and whether if the contractor agrees that he wants to do this work as a change order, and that we can get that curb guy maybe do that the curb work before he goes to Belleville, or give us a time shortly thereafter.
Okay. But it looks beautiful, thank you. It looks
great. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the assistant engineer, Yola Mahenzig, did a tremendous job with getting these drawings done in a short time frame and in helping with the options that we presented to SHPO.
Great.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Jovan.
I had one more. Sorry.
Sure.
I just wanted to thank you and Jovan for getting through this whole process. But the question is, what kind of car are you envisioning that will park in the compact spot? Because I know if we have pretty long spaces now, and a lot of SUVs could fit in a 2-foot shorter spot, but then maybe like the large full-size extended cab, giant trucks wouldn't be. So is it going to be strictly just cars or crossovers, or no SUVs, or certain types of SUVs, or have you gotten that far?
I don't think we need to, let's use an ugly word, discriminate against SUVs. I think we'll just keep it at a length criteria, 16 feet. We use a similar length criteria in some of the regulations the council recently adopted for Glenwood Hill. We prohibited vehicles over a certain length from using that because of the difficulty they had in negotiating the turn. Here it would be something similar. An ordinance would be prepared for your council's consideration, prohibiting a vehicle of greater than 16 feet in a 16-foot space.
Great, thank you.
But don't you anticipate, like, if because my car's pretty short, so if I typically park in a regular space, I would just go over to compact, and that would open up those other spaces anyway for larger vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, you're describing what a conscientious motorist would do.
Right, you would just shift
Make
over.
their car fit in the most applicable space, leaving the other ones for everyone else.
Right. Okay, good. And move for you.
Thank you. All right, moving on.
Right. Thanks. If we could, I wanted to know if we could possibly move our one item from policy, appointing the municipal humane law enforcement officer up, only because we do have our representative here to answer any questions if you have it.
Sure.
And this way, she wouldn't be delayed any longer. So that's item D1. So I have to get to that item myself. So this is the municipal humane law enforcement officer. This is required by state statute. It's a recent statute. It basically makes this individual or individuals responsible for the enforcement of all animal welfare or animal cruelty laws of the state and ordinances of the municipality, the investigation and signing of complaints concerning a violation of an animal welfare or animal cruelty law of the state or ordinance of the municipality, and all cases of this will be heard in municipal court, and the fines will be distributed in accordance with the directives of the administrative office of the courts. So this is the ordinance to establish the position, which we have to do first, and then we have to then appoint the municipal humane law enforcement officers. And as was mentioned in June, they are representatives of Tyco, who are animal control officers currently. And so I think there are 3 or 4 who are being designated as this. They will be sworn in as law enforcement officers and or as animal control. No, it's municipal humane law enforcement officers, but they're enforcement officers, so they do have to be sworn in. And so therefore, it's just basically, this is about the ordinance. We'll adopt the ordinance, have it up for adoption in August. And then at that time, after adopting the ordinance, we will appoint the municipal humane law enforcement officers through resolution. So I didn't know if you had any questions or any concerns. Again, we're required to do this by state statute, so.
No, I just think they're amazing, so we appreciate the work that you do. Thank you, and thank you for that safety of the bear, so we appreciate that.
Okay.
Amazing.
So now we'll go back to the budget items. So the first is award of a contract for a 2018 utility vehicle for EMS. This is a 2018 Ford F-450 modified utility vehicle. It's replacing a 2000 Chevrolet 1500 pickup. There was a committee up from EMS, the deputy chief, special operations member, and Chief Lillo went through this, looked at it, and put together a specification for the new vehicle. They found that this would be the best fit for them. It is being purchased through the Houston-Galveston Area Council Cooperative Purchasing Program. It's not to exceed $118,000. It will take approximately 8 months from the date the order is placed until it is delivered. The Chevy pickup that is being replaced does not really have any trade-in value, so it'll be put into the fleet to be used.
Do we pay tax on this?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Do we pay tax?
Tax? No, we don't pay tax because we're.
We don't pay tax, okay.
No, we don't pay tax on any purchases.
Got it.
Okay. The next item is the security system at Village Hall. As you know, we have a contract with Secure Watch, and these are a few additional items which we are adding to the project. One is replacement of a screen to conform existing space, including wall mount cables and group training. Also alarm controls consisting of stainless steel electrical plates, and then an additional 10 licenses for the existing cameras. Some of those licenses will be cameras for these new kiosks. So that's why we need additional licenses. And then also cameras, and as it says, cameras for pilot program kiosks, replacement of non-conforming cameras. So that's a total of $45,141.52. So, but these are all necessary to move forward, and we do believe it's a good idea to have the cameras on the kiosks as well.
So I just had a quick question. How did the maintenance agreement, we're adding that now, right? So why wasn't that on the original paperwork? Because it's there, it's dated. Is there a reason that we're adding it now but didn't have it in the original paperwork?
Are you aware? Yeah, Mr. Rooney is going to come up. I know he worked with Sergeant Chuck.
It's just a big change.
With this. Sergeant Chuck kind of headed up this project, and then Mr. Rooney worked with him as well.
So in the original agreement, we were offered the option of doing it, and we didn't have the chance to go and evaluate what benefit it would be to have them support the ongoing service. We talked to Dylan, said, is this something we can do in-house? He said, no. I mean, it would take hiring additional people to be on call every time something happened. So in talking to Jay, we concluded that if one of these systems went down in the middle of the night where the police needed access to it, this was the best way to handle it. So it was just a matter of timing as to when we finally got around to addressing it, that's all. But I think, again, in talking to Jay, it's well worth the support that we're going to get out of this.
And that agreement covers the additional 10, so that the additional 10 licenses for existing cameras that are being converted, so that's covering all of that if there's any issue?
That's correct. In addition, just to note that they proposed a 5-year rate on maintenance.
I saw.
And we're not allowed to go that far according to state law. So we narrowed it down to 2, but they kept the same rates.
Got it.
So
I understood that part. It just seemed like such a huge jump, and I didn't understand why we didn't have that in the original paperwork. Okay, all right.
Questions?
Okay. The next item is a purchase of a self-contained compaction unit under the National Joint Powers Alliance Cooperative Purchasing System. This is for a recycling center. Currently, we have a actual packer truck that's there, and this is for the corrugated cardboard. So by having this compaction unit, self-contained, what will happen is it'll save money in the fuel because the truck won't be idling, cut down on vehicle idling, and will free up the valuable piece of packer equipment truck that can be used either for sanitation or recycling pickup. So it's a wonderful idea. It's an amount not to exceed $35,000, and it's in this year's capital account. Okay, the next one is snow plowing services. We went out to bid. We received 2 bids, one from Conquest Construction and the other from Downs Tree Service. It was hourly rates of various equipment and services. Conquest Construction was the lowest bidder for all line items the bid requested. They are out of Westwood, New Jersey. They are the ones who have plowed with us for the past 6 years. The sidewalk clearing bid item will use, we'll see how much we have to use it. We're hoping that we can use some of our own staff since we have hired permanent part-time people in our Public Works division, so it's possible that we may be able to do it with our own staff. However, it is in the bid, and if need be, we can use it. It's a total amount not to exceed $120,000. Good?
Yep.
Go on.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Sale of compost, Lakeview Compost Facility. Every year we do sell the compost in September, so we'll clean out the Lakeview area so that the new leaves can come in. Downs Tree Service has been, DTS Trucking has been collecting our compost for the past several years. We have approximately 10,000 cubic yards available. Their quote is in accordance with New Jersey statute, which allows the award of a contract for the marketing of recyclable materials without bids, and they are going to pay us $25,000 for that compost.
Questions?
Okay. The next one is furnishing and delivering of leaf collection services. Once again, we went out for bid. We received 2 bids. The low bid was $92,460. It came from DTS Trucking again. They are the ones who have done it in the past. As you recall, Section B is the area that we have the contractor do. It is 3 pickups, as it is in all of the other sections, and again, he's requesting that it be awarded to the low bidder, $92,460.
I remember in the budget we had approved expenditure of extra machinery that would eliminate the need for one of these leaf contractors. Is this impacted at all through this?
You know what, as far as the machinery, it's helping us in the other areas. Is that your question? Are we not going to have the contractor as much?
Right.
No, we are going to need them again this year. I know the claw is one thing. I don't know the official name of it, but the thing that picks up the leaves as a claw motion, that's been very helpful. But this year, unfortunately, we can't do away with the contractor. Hopefully in future years, we may be able to reduce the area that they do.
So next year?
We'll do our best. That's what I can tell you. Okay?
So just to understand, because we just started doing this, it was just only a few years ago, and my
Correct.
recollection is just a few years ago, it was around maybe 62-ish?
Right.
Do I
Started
recall,
low.
do I remember? I don't know.
I think the first year they didn't know what they needed to do, and as they have done this now for several years, they're more aware of what they need to do, and they realize that it takes additional staffing and additional work on their part, and this is probably more in line with what their true costs are.
So, but every year it's gone up.
It has.
Like a big jump. And I you know, I should have emailed earlier and just asked to see the historical numbers on this because...
We can give them to you, certainly, but the first year, absolutely, I think they didn't realize what it entailed.
Right, and then we went up $10,000 or something more, and now we're up to, like...
Yeah. I don't know, Mr. Rosales, do you know the difference from last year to this year? I don't know offhand.
Good evening again. Last year, I think it was in the high 80,000s. One of the reasons we have a slight increase in cost is we rewrote the bid document, made it much more comprehensive, because last year we noticed that at times when the street was done, it was not as clean as we had liked it, and we didn't have such strong language in the contract to obligate the contractor to clean it up. You know, rakers, a sweeper after the bulk of the leaves have been picked up. We also gave contractors an option to collect the leaves with loaders and dump trucks or with leaf vacs. Either or, again, to try to open up the interest in bidding. Unfortunately, we only had 2 basic bidders.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So the next item is the infrared asphalt surface repair, trench patching, and miscellaneous curb and sidewalk repair. So this includes repair and restoration of sidewalk slabs, driveway aprons, patching of trenches with stabilized base asphalt mix. J. Fletcher Kramer was the apparent low bidder. This is the second year of a 2-year contract. They have agreed to renew it with no change in pricing, and so they'd like to award the work for the second year to J. Fletcher Kramer Construction in an amount not to exceed $150,000. And this is to restore the streets when there are trenches dug.
So this is $1,267 for the whole village?
No, it's $150,000, not to exceed $150. The $1,267 is for the aggregate of all the unit items.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay.
I'm with you. Yeah.
That'd be a pretty good
It is a
deal.
steal.
The next one is the release of escrow funds for Stop and Shop, and that the project is now complete. We have $14,354.50 of escrow funds that can now be released. Okay, the next one is on vehicle emergency equipment for the fire department. We awarded this contract to Regional Communications, I think it was in June, it may have been May, and it was for police, fire, and EMS. Fire did not get the information to us soon enough, so this is specifically for the fire department, still to Regional Communications. So, and again, they were the successful supplier for the past 2 years for this kind of equipment. Okay, the next one is hot box asphalt repair. This is a hot box, if you don't know, is a truck pulled trailer that maintains a load of asphalt at a high temperature for patching potholes. It provides for a better quality patch. So this is through the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance, through Timmerman Equipment Company out of White House Station, New Jersey. It's an amount not to exceed $44,200. Okay. The next one is, this is an annual resolution for the pilot for the Ridgewood Senior Citizen Housing Corporation. In lieu of paying taxes, the Housing Corporation pays an annual service charge to the village for municipal services. The charge is 6.28% of the annual gross revenues, plus the cost of sanitary sewers and solid waste collection and disposal. And the village also guarantees their timely payment of principal and interest due on revenue bonds issued by the Bergen County Improvement Authority. And so for that, we receive an annual reimbursement of $25,000. Again, it's an annual resolution that we do. The next one is the resolution for the tax collector to be allowed to substitute 2 mailings of tax sale notices in lieu of 2 legal ads. It also permits her to add $25 per mailing to the annual amount sold at the tax sale. She expects the tax sale to take place in October. That's another annual resolution.
Yep.
The next one is a recommendation of award for partial roof replacement for Village Hall. In the recent heavy rains during the spring, we noticed that we were having a lot of leaking through the roof in the violations department. When they went up to inspect it, they realized it can't be patched, and so therefore we had actually 12 plan holders picking up, and we received 7 bids. So it was very competitive. The low bid is actually $122,650. It's Advanced Roofing and Sheet Metal Company out of Belleville, New Jersey. And that's it. The next one is for vegetative management. As you know, we did remove some of the village's trees at the view on Crest Road recently through Downs Tree Service. This is a continuation of that work because what it will do is a lot of closer to the wall. A lot of the vegetation has grown up close to the wall or just above the wall. And so this is to take a mower and mow that down, a mower head, and it mows down that area so that it is level with the wall. And so some of the vegetation almost looks like young trees, but it's actually weeds that are growing up there. So this is the last part of this. It is a proposal at $3,050 for one day, and if they need a second day, it'll be an additional $2,000. But this will complete that process, and once if the council agrees to do this, once it's approved, we'll get a date and we'll notify both the people on Crest, but also the people on Hillcrest below, so they're aware that this project will have one more part of it. Actually, they have already been notified that there is another part, but we'll try to give them at least a week's notice so they're aware when it will take place. Okay. The next one, we're moving into policy, amending the ordinance on the outdoor cafes, and this is enforcement. We want to designate multiple people within the village to enforce, and that would include the code enforcement officer, the village sanitarian, the village construction code official, the director of public works, the fire code official, the police department, and the fire department. So we have multiple people who could enforce, which is good. And then I can tell you that our code enforcement officer has been out already during the day. She's noticed some infractions, so she is issuing some summonses. In addition, we do have the police department going around at night to see if they've seen any. And in addition, we're going to have, kind of as we do with our water violations for watering when they're not supposed to water, we'll have various people going out during the nights as well, just to see what the setup is at night, because I myself, and I know many of you, have been in the CBD with the outdoor cafes, and a lot of them, you know, have kind of encroached into other real estate, have screwed things into the sidewalks, which you're not allowed to do. So there are a lot of several violations out there which we're going to address. So that's the next one is proposed zoning amendments, encroachment of stairs, front yard setback, District B2. This ordinance, I think, really needs to come back internally. We'll discuss it some more, and we'll bring it back to you in August. So that'll be another ordinance for August. The next one is residency requirement for civilian positions. So I know Deputy Mayor Knudsen had asked for this to be on the agenda.
Yeah, so I appreciate this. So as many know, back in 2014, the residency preference for civilian positions was removed, and it became, I think the first document that you have in front of you is the first change that was rejected by the state of New Jersey Civil Service, because it created an ordinance that had a Bergen County contiguous county and New Jersey, the New Jersey state, and that violated civil service rules. So it had to be either the tier of Ridgewood, Bergen County state, or straight up state. And so because of that, on civilian positions, and it was always about civilian positions, just to be clear, that excluded public safety positions. So what happened doing that is that our residency, any jobs that became available, so if it's a clerk typist, do you want to give me examples? I always kind of get caught up in this, just general, leaf rakers, et cetera, went statewide as opposed to first showing a preference to our village residents. And so I think back then, Councilman Seaton and I made an argument to retain the residency preference for those civilian positions, because our residents know our neighborhoods, they know our streets, they know the town, and it's our tax dollar. So if somebody can do the job and they're a resident of Ridgewood, certainly we should make that job available to a resident first. So I hopefully will be interested in bringing back the residency. It's a preference, and so somebody has to be qualified for the position. And it just shows preference to a Ridgewood resident, then Bergen County, then state, as opposed to just advertising all of our jobs within the municipality statewide. So
So once we have exhausted the list of residents that would apply for those jobs, if we can't find a qualified person to fill them, then we'll expand out to the county and eventually to the state.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, my position hasn't changed on this, so I think we should definitely bring it back. But yeah, it doesn't preclude us from hiring any, so if there's somebody who's more qualified for a position, we don't have to hire the Ridgewood resident, so it's just a preference. So if someone's basically maybe equally qualified, then you break the tie by giving it to the Ridgewood resident.
Got it.
The only instance would be if it were a competitive title, because in competitive titles, the ranking would be residents, and then county residents, and then state residents. So you would have to exhaust, you'd have to be within the top 3. So if you had 10 residents, you'd have to exhaust all the residents before you moved on. So that would be in a competitive title for a civilian position.
You know, and I think it's really important to note that something that Councilman Seaton just said, that if somebody's more qualified, but in fact, you know, there's always going to be someone more qualified, but what we're really talking about is someone who's qualified, somebody who meets the qualifications of the position, and everything being equal, that it goes to a position would show preference to a Ridgewood resident.
If two candidates are or more equally qualified.
They meet I think it's important to state that because when you're advertising for a job, you have to meet certain qualifications, certain criteria that's laid out, whether it's, you know, educational or certifications or whatever, your physical ability, agility, you know, whatever that qualification is. You have to meet the qualifications, and then you're just showing preference. So if you don't have an eligible candidate within Ridgewood that's appropriate, then you would go to the county and then state.
More questions?
Yeah, I just, I think we need to be really clear on that, because so as you guys know, I'm in HR, and this is a topic that has been coming up as they change some of the salary rates within the state. So a lot of employees are raising the minimum wage, and this is really coming into scrutiny because there is a minimum qualification for a job, and there are individuals who are more qualified. And the more qualified is where there's a gray area. So we would really need to define what more qualified or what preference means, because it could be subjective based on who's doing the hiring. So for our protections, I think, and I can give you guys some samples because I'm actually working on this as we speak at work. There are minimum qualifications, and then there's different gradings of these other qualifications. So whether we do it as a point system, or there has to be some system for us so that if we're challenged,
we can always refer back
we can refer back to what we mean by more qualified or preference.
But
civil service.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
because
already
of civil
laid out.
service, we are, in the specs, it gives the requirements both educationally, experience-wise. And so as long as they meet the minimums, they'll qualify.
No, but they had indicated that preference and more qualified, if we're picking somebody amongst 2 people, let's say, or 3 people.
I think that's why I corrected. I said that
Yeah.
you meet all I'm saying is the civil service defines the criteria of what qualifications
Yeah.
are required for a position, and what I said was if somebody meets the qualifications, that's why I said that. That's
Yeah.
what I corrected, that
Yeah.
I didn't say that it was that somebody necessarily is more qualified, less qualified. They have to
Right.
meet the qualifications that are
Yeah, and the
outlined.
challenge,
Right.
obviously, it would be great for us that we'd have so many candidates that were more than qualified, but just so that we're very careful about how.
But it'd be helpful to have the samples.
Yeah,
I think it would be
because
helpful.
it is, because you know what, and this is great for New Jersey, the more jobs we have and the higher rates of pay, they're more competitive. So when you have lots of pools of candidates, and it's very hard, and a lot of companies are going to applicant tracking systems that are grading them, so you don't even see the people. So it's, well, it's kept track in each individual corporation. So, so it's tough.
Councilman Boyd? Questions, comments? No?
Okay, so are you then in favor of doing an ordinance, introducing an ordinance for this, to restore it? Okay. So the next item is the returning the school board election to April. As indicated in the statute, it can be done either by referendum, by a petition, by the public. It can be done by a vote by the Board of Education, or it can be done by a vote by the governing body. And so this is something that the council wishes to consider. And if we did so, it would be effective next April. So there would be an election in November, and then there would be an election in April 2019, is my understanding. So.
Yeah, so I guess it's important to provide some context because I know a lot of comments came up, but just for the record, so before 2012, all the school board elections statewide were held in April until, and that's when residents could vote both on the candidates for school board as well as the tax proposals. And that changed in January 2012 when then Governor Chris Christie signed legislation that allowed districts to move their school board elections to November. After the legislation was signed, Ridgewood changed its school board elections to November as well. But it's important to know that districts that hold the November elections do not have to put the budget up for a vote. And I think that was one of the concerns that was raised earlier, as long as they stay under the 2% cap. Right? That was one distinction.
Well, you have to stay under the 2% cap or qualify for the exemptions.
For the exemptions, which would be the increase in health benefits and so on. Right.
Right, there are certain exemptions that, and right, so you could use your cap bank as long as that's falling into your exemption.
And a lot of arguments that surface whether the cap banks have managed to keep property taxes lower or higher. So why we're bringing this up now, there was a moratorium on changing the elections back for 4 years, and then it was extended for an additional 2 years. So it's been 6 years since municipalities could now weigh in on this about regarding moving the vote back to April. And that moratorium, the last extension, expired May 31st of this year. So this is just here. It's timely for us to talk about it. We've heard a lot of comments from many residents that were not pleased with the BOE budget this year, and they felt that they didn't have a voice or say in the process. The other issue was some of the transparency around the deadlines for filing to become a candidate for school board. With the election in November, that deadline is actually at the end of July. So right in the middle of the summer when a lot of folks are not around, not engaged, and there were some concerns that that residents basically didn't have the transparency or the empowerment to be a participant in the process. And if we change the election back to April, it doesn't impact the election this year in November. It would just push up the next year's November 2019 election to April 2019. So that would shorten those board members' terms by about 6 months. That's the impact.
Right, but they had those same board, at some point somebody had theirs actually extended when it went from April to November, so it's kind of a wash. But just a little more, some additional background. So some of the concerns that came up back in April and May, and I want to actually go back to 2016 when the mayor and I, back then, we had a meeting with the Board of Ed, and we were concerned that the packets for Board of Ed trustee were not being advertised on the Board of Ed website. And actually, I think we had asked that they be advertised so that individuals knew the filing deadlines and how that worked, but there seemed to be some level of satisfaction with having the School Board Association advertise. So again, in 2017, and I guess in 2018, and asking again, because during this time, the past few years, the Board of Ed seats have remained uncontested. So primarily because nobody's going on a fishing expedition or looking on the School Board Association website to find that there are filing deadlines, that there are open seats. Nobody even knows when these seats are open. And it's not that there's any opposition to the current board members, it's just a matter of just a robust conversation and opportunity to really discuss issues and concerns. And back when we did vote in April, There were always debates. I believe the League of Women Voters held debates for the school board elections, and there were candidate debates, and it was really an opportunity to have a dialogue about budget issues, educational issues, keeping teachers, how do we, deliver those budget funds to the proper places. And so there was a lot of interest back in April and May to have this moved back. And there was, again, a discussion with the Board of Ed. I think that the village manager was there as well to consider this. And we hadn't heard anything, and residents were very much interested in having this moved. So we did learn since then is that Clifton has since, I think you have in your packets the article that Clifton was considering it, and I think the following day after that article, they actually did move their elections back to April. And it wasn't a matter of how many people came out and voted, because even at 15% is about 2,000, 2,200 people that would come out and vote. The issue was that those people who came out and voted were actually more informed than those people voting the same time in November, because everything was getting lost in the shuffle of state and national politics. So jump in.
I just had, Heather, do you have any idea of the number of people who actually voted in the last Board of Ed election? Do you have that?
I don't have that offhand, no. But what I can tell you is we had a special election one year in November because unfortunately one of our council people passed away. And when we had that special election, what we found is that for council, first of all, because of the way the county lays out the ballots, the candidates look like they're in party lines. So that kind of does away with the nonpartisan feeling. In addition, we found that 40% fewer people voted the bottom of the ballot than voted the top of the ballot. So I don't know offhand. I can find that out, though.
I think it would be interesting, but I would venture to say that I don't think the participation would have changed really that much. I don't think it went up drastically, and there's certainly, in November, there's presidential elections, governors, state
Correct.
assembly, state senate, senators,
and a lot of people only vote that top part. So.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I'm actually not in favor of moving it to April. I'm just going to give some statistics that I pulled up the other day. Ridgewood in 2012, in the November election, 71% of the people voted. And this is actually from the state. I pull this off the state.
Did you say 71%?
71%. It's from the general election results, November 6, 2012. It's right off the website, okay, for the state. In 2014, 20%. In May of 2014, 20% of the residents voted for the village council. In November of 2014, 47% voted in the November election. In 2016, 34%. In May 2016, 34% voted for the village council. In November 2016, 74% voted. So, my concern is that we're getting less participation in May and early on in the year versus in November. And we certainly want our residents to participate in the voting process. And my thinking is, number one, I think the people who were voted for on the Board of Ed, they deserve a chance. I mean, they have suggested that, they'll have a September open public forum to kind of talk about this. I think it's a good idea. I think that the residents who are concerned certainly can express their concerns at that time. I'm just concerned that, we are going to end up getting less and less people voting for stuff that's relatively important for us. And, my thinking is, even on the village council side, I think we should be moving our elections to November as well, so that we can get more people participating in the voting process. So I'm actually in favor of, and I know that the League of Women Voters is looking at this, is moving our elections to November of the 2018, 2020, so again, we can get more people participating in the process. I am not in favor of us mucking in the Board of Education's business. That's their business. They can figure it out, and less people vote, and I think that's a huge concern of mine. So I'm not in favor of doing it.
I think some of those numbers might be misleading, though, because in 2012 and 2016, it was a presidential election, so obviously you're going to get a 70% turnout because that's the big one in America. Everybody comes out, or most people come out for that one.
It's two and a half times the number of people have voted in 2014 and 2016. It's just, I mean, it's staggering.
But you're not, it's not, that's why I asked the question specifically about the number of people who actually voted in the school board election, because it's obvious, everybody knows that 70% plus people come out and vote in the presidential election. I would wager that the vast majority of those people who voted for the president in either of those years did not vote for the Board of Education. I would say that number probably has not changed much since April, and I get a lot of questions about taxes, especially this past election. I knocked on almost 1,600 doors, and the majority of questions I got are, where are the garage, and what are you doing about taxes? And I go through my spiel, and, we're 22% of your taxes, and we had less than 1% increase, and the school board's, 2/3 of your bill. So they said, well, what do you do about that? And we can't do anything about it. It's all up to the school board. There's no oversight, and I think the residents, if they so choose, should have a voice in it.
I just want to add to, I'm sorry.
Councilwoman wants to have a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bernadette.
Yeah. So, I was a little, at first blush, 4th of July, actually, one of the board members mentioned this to me. I quite honestly didn't know that it was on the agenda, and then the former mayor, actually mentioned it to me almost like within the same week. So at first blush, I was like, I kept thinking the November election gets more voters out, and we always talk about we want more people to be involved in the process. So I had a conversation with my teenage daughter, who's actually going off to college to be a political science major, and who's voted the first time since this past November. And I said, give me your opinion about this, figured a fresh set of eyes. And she said, well, tell me, what the budget, and I said, the school budget's $110 million and ours is about $45 million. And she said, well, then why shouldn't everybody question your vote on your budget? So that was, again, a fresh set of eyes of, it may be $110 million, but $45 million is a lot too. So do you want the same residents to have that option to this is kind of, peeling back the onion and having the conversation. So I guess my first thing is, if you're going to vote, you're going to vote. If you're a person that's involved in the village, and I can see all the people that come to all the meetings, they're voters. They're coming out to vote. The November election gets a lot of people who are out to vote just to vote, which is a fabulous right that everybody has, and we can't question how they're voting, what they're voting on. If they vote or don't vote when they get in the voting booth, they may vote for one person and not the others. So I guess for me, the bigger question is, if you have an April election where you have, I'm just going to make a number up, 1,000 really involved people who know the issues and who are really smart, good voters, but you have in the November election 4 times that, are you not doing the right thing by moving it back to April? So I'm actually on the fence, because I really don't have the answer as to which is the better way. And my initial reaction would be, get more voters out, whether they're good voters, bad voters. They have the right to vote. They have the right, and they should be engaged in their community and find out when a school board election is coming up. It is public information. There's enough people that talk about it. We all found our way to the process when we ran for village council. The people that are on there now found their way there. So I guess that to me is a separate subject.
Yeah, I think that the people that the board members, and again, it's not a reflection or a commentary about their service on the Board of Education, but every single member that's sitting on the Board of Education right now ran uncontested over the past years, because there's no advertising. You would not know where I would not, until the election is upon us, do I say, really, who's running? Because there's no advertising, there's no communications, there's no information forwarded. They're no longer advertising. It's actually, the good news is, the Board of Education President Vince Longto had called me a couple of times over the past 2 days, and I said, you don't even advertise, and this is, I'm talking since 2016, I said, why don't you advertise this, let people know. Yesterday, I guess it was yesterday, the day before, they just put it up on their website, and then, so I said to our village manager, you know what, let's put it on our website, because we really, at some point, you really need people to understand that there's an election, there's a process, there's a packet, there's 10 signatures required to run for the Board of Education. It's not like us that have to gather hundreds of signatures. It's a lot less cumbersome. But more importantly is, and to your question to, I guess, Celeste, why don't you then scrutinize this village council budget? The answer to that is very simple. There's no provision in the law to do that. There is a provision in the law that permits a vote on a budget on the Board of Education if your election is held in April. And there's also the opportunity. Now, one of the things that Vince mentioned to me, he said, well, this should be a conversation in the fall because everyone's away on vacation. Everyone is, kind of out on the beach and whatever. And my response to him was, yes, and you're advertising, the packets are being advertised on a New Jersey School Board Association website, and the packets are due, the petitions are due, July 30th, when everyone is out sleeping and vacationing. So then that ultimately, I guess, drives the point as to why it might be a good idea to move it back to April. And this was, again, it was a discussion I had back in April and May, and nothing came of it. And there's a window of opportunity to do this. It has to be done no less than 85 days prior to the April election. However, there is, the moratorium expired on May 31st, 2018. There's something in the legislation in the Assembly now that would put that moratorium back in place. It was introduced in, I believe, April, and so there's a window of opportunity. So the idea that we're mucking into the school board affairs, I actually think that we are engaging in a taxpayer concern and a voting concern. So I just, I think it's an important discussion.
So are they, I don't know if we have the answer, are all of the school board members for or against? Do we know anything about how they want it to?
So just as a way of background, the one part of our conversation and some of the details that were provided, we went back to the minutes of 2013 when that was changed, and I don't have them with me, but I think it's actually in a letter that Mr. Longto had sent to the e-news distribution, and that's just district folks. I think some of us are no longer on the distribution list when our youngest graduated. But in any event, so in 2013, when they had this 3-meeting open forum, what they learned was that one former or 2 former Board of Ed members thought it should be moved to November, and one resident stated it should be moved to November as long as, because of that 2% cap, you can't beat us down on taxes. If you can't go over the 2% cap, don't do it. Another resident, so that was 3, another resident took no position, and 4 residents said, keep it in April. This is an important vote. It's an important discussion, and it's important to have candidates and people that are actively engaged. But the board, despite that, voted 4-1 to move it to November. So if the idea to have a robust conversation, as is being suggested, would happen in October or November, we had more people speak today, and certainly a majority, who said, move it, and we had actually more people than their 8 people back then. So
but can't we invite them next week? I'd like to hear from the Board of Education.
Sure.
I only heard from one, and then we got the letter forwarded from Vince, but I don't know that was from the board or it was a letter as the president of the board, so I don't know what their feelings are. for all we know, they may all be in favor and this conversation's moot because they would agree with us, so.
So they're welcome to come to the podium,
Yeah,
you know.
why don't we invite them for next
Yeah.
week, formally?
We can do that, sure.
And so we could have a discussion with them, they'd be sitting, yeah, perfect, that's a great idea. Yeah, great idea.
And then also, if we could get the numbers of the people who actually specifically voted in the school board election in, you know, maybe last year, the past couple, since this has changed, because
Okay.
again, I'm positive that everybody who voted for president did not go right down the line and vote for, I'm sure it's 70%.
They don't, and in other towns, they have noticed that fewer people vote the bottom of the ballot than the top of the ballot. You know, like I said, with us specifically, it was 40%. I don't know if it's that high, but certainly we can take a look.
And I'm sure the Board of Ed will have the data on the voters as well. If they can provide that, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll get that.
All right?
Okay, so the next one is licensing sellers of e-cigarettes. We had done this in June. We had discussed it in June. Dawn Citrullo, our health officer and director of health department, just wrote a memo just saying, again, that she'd like the council to adopt the ordinance to license the sellers of the e-cigarettes and related products. 30 New Jersey municipalities have done so already. She's recommending the fee for an annual license at a rate of $1,200 per establishment, with a prorated fee for licenses purchased after July 1st at $600. Westwood and Princeton currently do charge a $1,200 fee. The money obtained through the licensing fees will be used to conduct inspections at the locations as well as sellers of cigarettes. These inspections will include compliance checks for selling to those under age 21, as well as other requirements regarding the sale of these products. Money will also be used for educating parents with pamphlets and things like that. I do want to let you know that currently we have 6 businesses who sell these vapes and also the e-cigarettes: Rite Aid, Speedway, Exxon Tiger Market, Quick Stop Wine and Liquor, Stop and Shop, and Cordially Yours. So I'm just looking for the council if this is what you want to do.
Yeah, and one of the things that we had discussed was how our anti-smoking policy near schools, particularly in public areas, did not include ESDs because ESDs weren't around at the time that they were written. So I think we need to update that.
Okay. So we can update that ordinance as well.
Yep.
So is
Questions,
everyone in
comments?
favor in
Yes.
doing so? Okay. So we'll do that. And we had given you both Westwood and Princeton's ordinances. Westwood is pretty straightforward, I think, and maybe we'll, use most of them as a basis. And the only thing that they did is they prorated the $1,200 fee quarterly. What Dawn indicated to me was that regardless, they're planning on inspecting at least twice a year in these establishments. So she recommended the $600 fee after July 1st because it's still the same amount of inspection they have to do, because they would be doing it in the second half of the year anyway. And so prorating it down, she said, they still have to spend the time to go out and inspect and make sure, do the compliance checks and things like that. So she is recommending 600. So as long as you're okay with that, that's what we'll go with.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is the amendment to the A-frame sign ordinance to allow displays. We also discussed this in June. This, again, is one that we're going to hold and we're going to discuss internally and try to get it right. We have our enforcing agents, which is our code enforcement officer and our zoning officer. They want to review it more closely so that we know we can enforce this ordinance once we adopt it. So we'll bring that back to you in August. The next one is the National Cooperative Purchasing Agreement. The National Joint Powers Alliance, which is a cooperative purchasing organization that we belong to, has changed their name to Sourcewell. Mr. Egershauser has crafted a resolution to formally acknowledge the name change and also to authorize the village manager to execute any agreements required by the name change. So that's an easy, straightforward one. We're now going to discuss the Shedler Field design. This was presented, I think, last December. And so it was discussed I know the ad hoc committee worked on this, and Councilman Hache and, at the time, Councilman Hache and Councilman Seaton worked on it, and so we'll have Councilman Seaton review it so that we can be reminded what the options were and what the option was that the ad hoc committee recommended.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Since December, nothing's really changed. The committee hasn't met, so this is basically procedural, just to memorialize the consensus that was agreed to amongst the committee. So we started our work several months before December, and again, it wasn't the friendliest meeting that I've ever been in the beginning. It was there's a little tension there, but eventually everybody came around and good information was shared, and we did arrive at a consensus. So just to remind everyone what was included, there's a lot of discussion about the inclusion of a field, and it was shown that pre-high school, mostly middle school, I think about 1,000 children in Ridgewood participated in various sports, soccer, lacrosse, things like that, and it would be most beneficial to have a field suited towards those needs. So it was a 75 yards by 50 yards was the size of the field. I remember there was some confusion over yards and feet, and that caused a little snafu, but again, we got through that. So that would be included closer to West Saddle River Road to provide the maximum buffer of trees between Route 17 and the neighborhood. In addition to that, the berm with tree line top was also included and approved. Is agreed on by the committee. Restoration of the house, the parking lot, I believe it was 44 spaces. I think it started out as 74, 77 spaces, and it got kind of whittled back a little bit to something a little bit more reasonable, which again keeps more trees, more of a buffer there in between Route 17. A children's playground is to be included, and 2 bathrooms, one men's, one women's, with an overhang, just in case there's a storm or lightning or somebody has to get out of some kind of weather event rather quickly. We have that option. Then there's a walking trail that meanders around the parking lot and up in the far, I guess the northeast corner, kind of, and meanders around there, and then comes back along the along the wider side of the property, and it meets up with the a sidewalk that will be included on West Saddle River Road also. The entrance will be closest to Terhune Road, because that was discovered through our deliberations that people could slow down, have the maximum space to the maximum area to slow down after coming off of Route 17 to safely turn into the parking lot. And I believe that was everything. The option A is what I think everybody agreed with. The parking lot would be contained behind the house, and it would be more of a square shape than the other option that was elongated and cut more into the smaller corner in the trees in that property. Again, there was a lot of discussion with, we had subcommittees on that group who talked to a lot of sports representatives, and people were included in the neighborhood. The neighborhood was well represented on the committee. So basically, this would just, I imagine we would memorialize this through a resolution, and then that gives us a blueprint to move forward. I believe the next steps would be to include the utility hookups for the bathrooms and a sidewalk, and then from there we would continue to advance this project until its completion. It would take several years, as any park development in Ridgewood does, but to get it started now rather than waiting, we'll get this delivered to that neighborhood much sooner. So, the recommendation has been and still is that we accept this design and get rolling on it.
Questions? Comments?
Okay, so we'll have a resolution for next week memorializing this. Did you mention, I'm sorry, I might have missed it, did you mention the playground?
Yes.
Yes, I
Okay.
did mention the
So
playground.
that'll be, so I'll take it from this one sheet that basically says the recommendations of the committee.
Yes.
And we'll create the resolution from that. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
The next one is, let me see, the ordinance for no left turns onto Franklin in and out of Starbucks. We're having an issue with people making the left-hand turn into Starbucks and then the drive-through, and then when they are exiting from Starbucks, making the left out. It was supposed to be, and according to the Zoning Board of Adjustments approval, that there would be no left-hand turn in and no hand turn out. In addition, we are having an issue with the queue for Starbucks, the drive-in Starbucks, going down Franklin Avenue. And so the police department has recommended, and we will talk to the Starbucks management there, to have there be an employee in the parking lot to be able to direct them to, because there are 2 lanes there, and there's enough, I believe they said for 20 cars total. I think it's 10 and 10 is what I was told. And so there really should be no queuing, because I can't imagine there's more than 20 cars at a time waiting. So I think it's just a matter of the employee directing them, letting them know that they can move in because there are 2 lanes open. So that's the first one. Then the other ones are on Jersey Mike's on Maple Avenue is the exit for that building. A lot of people are making the left off of Maple or the right off of Maple into the exit. And so we're going to do an ordinance that that's not permitted, those turns are not permitted. And then the last one, so those are those 2 that we want to do, those 2 in and out of parking lots. So everyone,
Yeah, Heather, did, they had put together a resolution with the zoning board for this, for the drive-through, right?
for Starbucks, yes.
Yeah.
And in that, they did say no left turn in and no left turn out.
But there was some other things, some other language in there that that additional work, to your point, there'd be additional work done in looking at this, assessing it if it got bad or it got
Yes,
worse.
they were supposed to have a traffic consultant come back after like 6 months or a year to look at it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that was ever done. I can check, but certainly, I think, you know, I asked Sergeant Chuck, who's our traffic control officer, and he just recommended that we start with the employee in the parking lot, you know, making sure to get the people in there. And if that happens, then that queuing issue, which, you know, is also becoming a traffic issue because people have to go around the queue to travel up Franklin, that may resolve it. He felt it may resolve it. If it does not, certainly, I think we have to go back and find out how we go about getting that traffic consultant to come back in.
Yeah, could you provide us with the resolution that was passed on this?
Yes,
Yes,
I
we
can.
just take a look at
Yes.
it? Thanks.
My understanding is they had a 1-year look back, and they haven't done that.
Is that what, I'm sorry?
They had a 1-year look back on
Right,
traffic, yeah.
right. Okay, so I will send that to you. Okay.
All right.
So everyone's in favor, though, of doing these? Okay.
Yep.
So the next one is amending the ordinance for the issuance of notices on dead trees. Again, this is to allow various village employees who address property maintenance issues to notify residents of hazardous trees and undertake enforcement actions if necessary. And so that would add the code enforcement officer as well as others. So this way, there would be several departments and divisions that can enforce this, you know, if they're dead or they're hazardous, and be able to issue citations for them to be removed if necessary.
Questions, comments, moving on?
Okay, the next one is the interim health officer coverage. We discussed this probably sometime this spring, maybe in April, maybe in March, and we did adopt a resolution. We are covering the health officer in the borough of Fair Lawn if she is out due to illness or leave, and she in turn would cover our health officer if she were out due to illness or leave. However, it didn't indicate within the resolution at that time that there would be no cost or no charge either way, and which just done as a courtesy to the other municipality. and Fairlawn came back to us and said they'd really like that in the resolution, so we're going to adopt this resolution, which does indicate that there will be no cost to either municipality for this interim coverage of the health officer. So that's why we're redoing it, even though we did it previously. Okay?
Okay, no questions? Moving on.
Okay, so now the review of the next week's agenda. We have no proclamations, we have no introductions or public hearings for Ridgewood Water. For Ridgewood Water, our resolutions are awarding a contract for the public policy consultant, awarding a professional services contract for the East Side Reservoir improvements, awarding a contract for Linwood and Cedar Hill wells, and authorizing the purchase of the Ridgewood Elks Club. The introduction of ordinances includes amending the valet parking ordinance, establishing the position of the municipal humane law enforcement officer, establishing the licensing of sellers of e-cigarettes, amending Chapter 265, vehicles and traffic, no left turn in and out of Starbucks on Franklin Avenue, amending Chapter 265, vehicles and traffic, no turn on North Maple Avenue into exit driveway of 305 East Ridgewood Avenue, which is Jersey Mike's building, and then amending the ordinance for enforcement for dead and dangerous trees, amending outdoor cafe ordinance for enforcement, and amending the parking meter rates and times. Resolutions include awarding a contract for vehicle emergency equipment for the fire department, award contract for vegetative management for the view at Crest Road, award professional services contract for meter rates and times for funding for Hudson Street parking garage. This is hiring Walker Consultants. Title 59 approval and award of contract for snow plowing services, award of contract for purchase of compost material, Title 59 approval of leaf collection services, award of contract for leaf collection services, Title 59 approval and award of contract for infrared asphalt repair, trench patching, and miscellaneous curb and sidewalk repair. Title 59 approval and award of contract for partial roof replacement at Village Hall. Award of contract under Houston Galveston Area Council Cooperative Purchasing Contract 2018 utility vehicle for emergency services. Award contract under Sourcewell National Cooperative Purchasing Agreement self-contained compaction unit for the recycling department. Award contract under National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance hot box for asphalt repairs. Amend contract for the security system at Village Hall. Authorizing shared services agreement for snow plowing with Bergen County. This is an annual agreement where we plow the county roads and then they reimburse us for that. Authorizing the interim health officer coverage with the Borough of Fairlawn. Authorizing the release of escrow funds for the Stop and Shop supermarket. Establishing the annual service charge and payment for guarantee bond for Ridgewood Senior Citizen Housing Corporation and guarantee of payment of revenue bonds. Authorizing the tax collector to charge for mailing of tax sale notices. Authorizing the village manager to execute membership agreements with Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Agreement, formerly National Joint Powers Alliance Cooperative Purchasing Program. Approving the field design for Shedler Park, and then the authorization for changing the school board elections. So, do you want any of them off of the consent agenda?
Yeah, I do want the Elks Club
Okay.
and the school board
Okay.
elections. And anything else for you?
Were there any others? So the next item is the manager's report. I just want to say July 4th was a great day in Ridgewood, starting with the breakfast and the flag raising at the train station, followed by a great parade, lots of bands, wonderful creative floats, and evening entertainment at the Castle Shell, and then the spectacular fireworks. I want to thank Tara Masterson and Lee Gilsenan, who are the co-chairs of that committee. They do a phenomenal job. I want to thank all the volunteers who helped them out during the year and on that day in particular. I want to thank all of our village departments who worked very hard on that day as well. It was really a wonderful day. I want to let you know for the Zabriskie Shedler House, the pre-qualification phase for the contractors is complete. The bid packages for the roof restoration work will be issued in late August, and we have requested a timeline from our vendor for the archaeology investigation of the property. So that's moving forward. Following Green Acres rules, we have completed one appraisal of the South Broad Street land for the Green Acres diversion, and a second appraisal will be completed in the next 30 days. We're required to get two. I just want to mention a few things about Graydon Pool. Opening day on June 2nd, we had older adults who were welcome to a meet and greet at Graydon Pool. They had coffee, juice, and bagels on the Graydon patio. Over 50 seniors attended this free event and learned about the wide variety of programs that makes Graydon such a wonderful community destination. This was jointly sponsored by Age-Friendly Ridgewood. A communication flag system will be used at Graydon Pool. It has been in use in the past. I just want to make people aware of it. Color-coded flags will be displayed near the children's area on the flagpole and on the bridge at the pool entrance near the parking lot. So green, it's like what's done down the shore, where green means swimming is allowed, yellow is caution, there may be inclement weather or a storm coming in, and red is no swimming. If the lightning detection goes off, there's a period of time where they have to stay inside and out of the water, and then if it doesn't sound again, then they're permitted back in the water. There will be a family movie on the beach. It's Happy Feet, Friday, July 27th at sundown. Admission is $5 per person. It's cash only. Bring a flashlight, chair, or blanket. Water's Edge Cafe will be open for movie treats. Graydon classes, they offer swim instruction, yoga on the beach, stand-up paddleboard, kayaking, diving instruction, and they have a competitive swim team. I want to let you know that there's free yoga in the park at Habernickel Park for ages 15 and older. That's at 1037 Hillcrest Road. Saturdays, July 14th, 21st, and 28th at 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. All levels are welcome and no pre-registration is required. So come and join us at free yoga in the park. Also, we have obviously a huge variety of camps for children this summer. We have the 6-week summer day camp, which is well underway, tennis instruction, arts and crafts mini camps, multi-sports camp for all ages, skateboarding, golf, rumble in the jungle with abracadoodle, little bits, engineering and robotics with explore science for grades 2 to 8, extreme STEAM with education explorers, science-related challenges, and lacrosse for children 5 to 7 years old. We also have a summer discount program to many of the popular recreational destinations. This includes Hershey Park, Six Flags Great Adventure, Wild Safari, Dorney Park, and Wildwater Kingdom, Medieval Times, the Crayola Experience. So go to Parks and Recreation at the stable and pick up your discounted tickets there. That's it.
All right. Council reports.
Starting
Councilman
down here.
Seaton, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had the Shade Tree Commission met yesterday, and some exciting news out of the Shade Tree Commission. The recommendation for the replacement tree at Graydon is an elm. So there are several newer varieties of elms that are resistant to Dutch elm disease, and I know that a sycamore tree was there for 150, 200 years, but historically there was also a second island included in Graydon, and on that was an elm tree. So Dutch elm disease wiped out a lot of these trees, and they, like I said, they have new varieties now that are resistant. So the recommendation was made because the elm is a very elegant tree, and sycamore tree it sheds bark, it's kind of dirty, it's messy, so in a pool environment that really wasn't the best option. So, if anybody would like the Shade Tree Commission to come and discuss this, that would be a fall planting, and gives us enough time to go out and specifically find the right type of elm and then plant it at the right time of year. But again, if you wanted more details, our arborist Declan Madden was there. He had a really good presentation. It was packed with details, and I could answer any questions if anybody had any questions, but that is the recommendation from Shade Tree. And then also this year we'd like to make a push during the capital budget discussions to at least come up with a program or a plan to remove all the brick bands from around the 219 tree wells downtown. Now, not every single one of those tree wells has a raised brick band around it, but universally it prevents water from getting into the trees. If there's runoff, it doesn't act as a dam, and survival rates for the trees are really severely impacted by the lack of water. So I don't think it's going to be a big ticket item, but we'd like to maybe get some estimates on that. And if the Central Business District Advisory Committee would like to work on us to come up with something or a plan, we'd be more than happy to work with them. And this would be a big step forward in improving survival rates for urban trees in our central business district, which are much more stressed than in any other environment because of all the traffic and everything else. So that's really it.
And the feedback on the new type of tree well has been tremendous from the CBD. So.
Yeah, and we also have funding to do another maybe 3 or 4 or 5 such tree wells like that. So that would be a removal of the brick bands, and then we would plant a tree in an empty well, and we'd amend the soil and put in the drains and do everything that we did with these others. So as they become available and as funding becomes available for us, we could, the Shade Tree Commission could do that on a tree-by-tree basis, but again, it was overwhelming response from the 2 or 3 years that we've been looking at this problem, that the watering is really what's greatly impacting survival rates, and removal of the brick bands would go a long way in helping those trees to survive and thrive in our downtown.
Deputy Mayor?
Great, thank you. So we'll start with Planning Board. Planning Board met last week, and we had our reorganization meeting, and continuing as chairman will be Richard Joel, vice chairman Joel Torrielli. Just some new appointments in that mix will be Melanie McWilliams will be appointed as the HPC member designee from the Planning Board. Dave Scheibner will continue as the Site Plan Exemption Committee along with myself. And we have a couple of open boards that we haven't completed yet, waiting for somebody to volunteer and raise their hand. And the Master Plan Advisory Committee, for the purposes of continuity, will continue with me, Richard Joel, Melanie McWilliams, and Joel Torrielli. And just for the record, I know this was asked earlier by Denise Lima, we have a fully executed contract with NV5 at this point, so that's what we were waiting for. We've kind of been just on hold. We were working out the details with our village engineer. He's gotten it all together. It was signed a couple of weeks ago, and so we're going to start this, a little bit of the process preliminary in the next few weeks, and then we'll really be kicking off in the fall. So they'll have a whole plan, and everyone, it is everyone all in, so it's a good thing. Also, the Board of Adjustment, just for the record, as we're talking about reorgs, the Board of Adjustment did meet last night. We understand that Sergio Allegre is the chairman of the board now. Greg Brown is vice chairman, and chairman pro tem Gary Negritz. So good luck to them and best to everyone. July 4th committee. So July 4th was amazing this year, and I just have to point out that Mike did an amazing morning speech about music and the history of music in Ridgewood, and you did a fabulous job. And Ramon, the mayor, he said a few words at the band shell right before the fireworks, and again, very on point and lovely, so really both were shining that day. A couple of items, we had our wrap-up meeting last night. We recognize the $50, $100 tickets were flat. The sales were a little flat. We're going to reevaluate that for next year, perhaps reduce the price and sell a few more tickets. I want to say that of the tickets I sold, 3 numbers were pulled, including a certain person up here. Would you like to raise your hand, big winner?
I don't know if there's a big winner.
So I was cheering for those.
I think I won $100 and some odd, which I told the committee to keep.
There you go. So the gap over our recap meeting resulted in a couple of things that we recognize as the gaps in the parade were significantly improved. The field was really much cleaner this year. Everything was much cleaner. That was the efforts of village staff and working with the 4th of July committee. We had more trash cans and a lot of information out there to please pick up after yourselves. Online ticket sales have been up significantly over the past 2 years that we've been doing those, so that's a positive, a lot less money transacting on the field, and it's a seamless system because it's just a scanner and it's 1, 2, 3. In the past, we have not had, or last year we did not have a program. This year at the 11th hour, we had a couple of program sponsors that stepped in, so we do have our 4th of July program this year. And we really do need to once again reiterate thanks to Tara Masterson, Lee Gilsenan, Chris Ramundi, and Skylar Suttel, which is Lee Gilsenan's husband. They are really the core group that operate this, along with Jack Egan, Kevin Emery, Mike Janke, and Bob Latsky. Those are our committee members. And special thanks to, shout out to Captain Amoruso and Lieutenant John Young from the Ridgewood Fire Department. You know, every week we meet, or once a month we meet on this, and they're all in, and everybody really puts in a tremendous amount of energy, effort. And then we meet twice before the actual day takes place with village staff members and make certain that everything is in place, that everybody is safe and secure, and that the day goes off without a hitch. So really great job for everybody. You know, it was really a great day, and one of the best, actually, in a very long time. And I just want to point out, Tara Masterson's brother did the logo this year, and it's absolutely beautiful, so good for him, too. And with that, Historic Preservation meeting tomorrow evening has been canceled. There are no applications, and I think that's it for me.
Councilwoman Walsh?
So I just have my chamber meeting. So the first meeting of the year, for me at least, was this morning. Like I mentioned, it was a robust meeting, which was very exciting to be there for this new journey. The conversation centered around parking, enforcement, and valet. So that pretty much took up the 2 hours, and then there was like 10 minutes for all the other stuff to fit in. But, you know, I mentioned in our meeting, I think 2 meetings ago, that there are some challenges. Citizen safety talks about it all the time with enforcement. So I think the bigger picture for us and the bigger conversation, and I think we should have it maybe in the coming weeks, is what is our plan, and how are we going to, for all of these groups, explain what our plan is going to be for enforcement. We hope that everybody's behavior gets better, but there has to be a plan for it. So I said that I would bring that back to the council so that we can, you know, make a plan for it. The valet discussion and its impact to the other businesses, I listened very intently as some of the store owners expressed their strong concern about this. So I know that this is a topic that we have touched on, but I think it does deserve a second look by us as to what we're going to do if others come in and request valet services. Sure. So the other thing that came up was there are some signs, there's some signage in the village, and I'll let the village manager know what they're talking about, that go hand in hand with enforcement, that some of the signs don't have the code. Like there's like a code signage that's usually below it. Right. And apparently some people have come to our court and gotten their tickets dismissed because they used that as a challenge. So that's the other thing that we will have to talk about. Restaurant Week is the week of August 12th, which is always exciting. You can go around to all the different restaurants in town. It's a lot of fun. It's a great time to catch up with your friends and have a lunch. Mrs. Doubtfire will be playing August 8th. That's the movie in the park, so everybody's invited to come and watch that. They wanted to thank everybody that participated and helped with the 4th of July parade and festivities, the day-long festivities. Is Pam still here? Pam is still here. So my daughter's working on her gold project, and she had her refillable water bottles, and she said she was going to park herself and give out her water bottles. It took her less than 10 minutes to give out 120 refillable water bottles. So she was shocked, I was shocked. I think the people were shocked that she was giving out free bottles. So yeah, she's working on that still. CBDAC, I guess you guys have your meeting tomorrow, so they're going to bring up the flower beds, police support for controlling traffic in the CBD, safety, and then Oak and Broad they're going to bring up with you tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And then the final topic that came up was the process, and again, enforcement of goods delivery within the CBD.
Particularly in Chestnut Lot, right?
Yeah, so apparently there is a process that they're supposed to notify the village when they're going to have deliveries where they're going to be blocking spaces, and that they bag the meter, and they are supposed to be bagging and paying for those spots when they get a goods delivery. Well, apparently some people are following the rules and many are not. So, again, enforcement, and, I said, listen, we are all for having everybody, changing the behavior and making sure everybody follows the rules, but with that comes, the other side of it. So if they're in, we're in, and we'll continue doing what's right for the village.
We should jokingly call the Chamber of Commerce meeting the monthly parking meeting.
Yeah.
That's what we talk about.
So maybe we'll move off of that and on to something else.
Thank you. Councilman Boyd?
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing to report, so I'm good.
All right. I don't have much to report. Just as Councilwoman Walsh mentioned, CBDAC is meeting tomorrow. In addition to the items that she just mentioned, we're also going to be talking about, we're bringing somebody in for the community app. They want to propose launching this in Ridgewood, so we're going to hear what they have to say, and from then engage with the businesses to see if there's any interest. And I also want to just add to the comments, the kudos to the July 4th committee. It was tremendous. It was the best I've ever been to. The fireworks were great, and I was really pleased to see a lot of people from other towns who I ran into just being there, and they said, "Oh, we never miss it for the world. This is the celebration," and it was wonderful. And I was also really pleased by how beautiful the downtown looked. I guess because we're going so slow in the cars. But again, that's the work of many different groups. A lot of hands on the plow, the Conservancy, Shade Tree Commission, Project Pride, Women Gardeners. Really, really great job by all the groups. And that's all I have. So with that, we'll go back to public comments. Not to exceed 5 minutes per person. Hello again.
Denise Lima, 319 East Glen Ave. June of last year, I think we talked about in the master plan that some residents would be part of the committee as well. So it sounded like you just mentioned more officials within, and I didn't really hear residents, so.
Sorry, so we'll be kicking that off with residents. There'll be charrettes and surveys and everything will begin in the fall. So you'll have ample notice of that, we'll make certain.
Great. Shedler, great update. What I didn't hear, I heard a little bit from Heather as well, is what the use of the house will be. So I'm glad that the roof is going to be addressed in the next few months. At the Ridgewood Historic Museum, we're busting out at the seams. It would be great if we could display more things there and work in tandem when you think about where Washington was and wasn't, and maybe do something like that. So as you think about that, I'm happy to sit in on that and have some discussions.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. We have a lot of ideas floating around with the new committee members and how we can maybe work together for that. The Chamber of Commerce meeting this morning and the comments about the parking. So as a resident, I think we all know we need greater parking, higher density, more development is coming in. And we need out-of-towners to come in to supplement our central business district, really, really important. But what I'm hearing now is employees will probably use the garage. Commuters, maybe out-of-town commuters will be using the garage. No, they can't do that?
In town.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's wonderful to hear that. And then out-of-towners coming in to use the garage as well. And the point of the comment is, there's a lot of people out of town that are going to be using the garage, probably less so than residents, and we just want to make sure that we're not going to be burdened with all of the tax or, parking increases, and in fact, where is the incentive for residents to continue to use the central business district? Because other towns, there's no meters. So in Milburn and Summit, they actually have programs in their parking lots as well as garages where residents get a discount in the pricing. And it would continue to dissent and not intermediate residents from leaving. So just my thoughts there. And then as far as the elections, I think it's really a great, healthy conversation. We should always challenge ourselves. What works, April, November, November, April, whether it be BOE or, the municipal elections. I just ask that we try to do as much due diligence as we can and get all of the facts, numbers. We talked about some are moving back to April. How many are not moving back to April? What are the other towns' experiences? And also, what is the scope that we're really trying to address? Is it more residents, just a percentage? Or is it we need more people to participate in being a candidate of the BOE? Because if it's just awareness, we can probably drive awareness for November to get more people to be candidates. So again, that just ties back to what's the pain points, what's the scope, and then we can kind of solve for it. And I just want to make sure we get the right facts to make a better informed decision. And I don't know if that's enough time between now and the next meeting. And I think somebody pointed out, nobody is here from BOE, and I think working as a team and collaborating, I think Brenda, maybe you might have mentioned it, I think it's just super important that we work together on this and that it's not an us and them. Under 5, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Cynthia Hallaby, 374 Evergreen Place. Belated congratulations to Mayor Hache. I look forward to working with you. Delighted. It's all very well and good that this plan, which we see over here, in the words of the DEP, constitute an encroachment on this historic property. What this plan does is to destroy a parkland forever. The cutting down of 15 trees, many of them mature trees that only need some trimming, despite, in all due respect to what Chris Ruttischauser said. And I have a photograph here just to remind you. And I'm also shocked that Mr. Seedon, with his love and interest of trees, would also go along with the destruction of 15 mature trees. The area is going to be cut back from 38 feet to 14, bearing in mind that 4 feet of that 14 is going to be for an ADA-compliant walkway. It leaves very little space to have benches and an actual park. Those benches, and you can see it on the plan, abut the parking. So really what is happening is the strip of green is going to be a buffer to the parking spaces. It is no longer green space that is usable as a park. I think this is really, really a shame. I urge you to put this plan to rest. I think that we should work together. We should make it a true pocket park. We should make it something that Ridgewood would be proud of. I realize that it's $200,000 to do this, so presumably you are hoping that with the cost of putting the garage and adding these 35 places, that then you can legitimately say you have now got X number of places at the parking garage plus 200, and the cost will then, of course, be lower. So I think that this is a little bit dishonest. 35 places is not enough to be ruining a possible park and a possible beautiful green space. So, and as you know, there are organizations that are willing to help. There's Age Friendly that is willing to put in benches. The Conservancy is willing to put in shrubs and trees. So we could really have a great place. And I urge you just not to tear this down and just put tarmac and cement in its place. The public knows very little about this. And so if you are going to soon be taking a vote, I think, first of all, that you should inform the public what's going on. There's been very little. I mean, I myself have come up and asked and sent emails, as you know, and to get no response. So I do think the public should know what you intend to do, because I think it is a crime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pamela Perrin, 123 Kenilworth Road. I appreciate the council thinking outside the box in trying to come up with more parking spaces. I see from the Historic Preservation Office's letter that the green sward by the train station was originally conceived of as a park, and it has significantly altered over the years. Well, yes, it is a little shabby, but look, if you trip on the first step, you don't throw yourself down the rest of the stairs. This is a lovely drawing. Clearly a lot of work has gone into it. But I myself am easily seduced by lovely drawings. This is not a park. If I'm reading the scale correctly, where those benches are, people's feet will be on the bumpers of cars. And if the benches are facing in the other direction, people will be tripping those walking down the walkway. I am one of those people who walks on the path. Every week I go to the farmer's market and I park at the far end so that I can walk down that path because it is green. And it's an aesthetic thing. The more green you see, the more beautiful that area is. So I would ask you to at least first maybe build the garage and see if you still need those 35 extra spots. Or install the kiosks and see if you still have a problem before you take away this green spot forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello again.
Saurabh Dani, good evening again. 390 Bedford Road in Ridgewood. And I just wanted to bring something to your attention before you vote on these ordinances or resolutions on consent agenda next week. So just to bring it to your attention on record. There are two different resolutions here. One is, I don't have the resolution number, file number 18250 and file number 18218. One is for snow removal and one is for leaf removal. Both of these contracts, the bids were received on June 13th. One was received at 10 a.m., the other one was received at 11 a.m. Both of these contracts have same two bidders. The name is different in one bid, but it's the same company, same address, same owner. So both of them, so they both were received on June 13th. They both have same two bidders. One gets one bid and the other one gets the other bid. And they both are within 2% of your line item that was in the budget. So the bidders somehow know what the village has budgeted for. Village has budgeted 90,000. The winning bid is 92,000. The second bid is 94,000. And the one which is second bid, the loser on one bid is the winner on the other bid. And they both were received on the same date. Both of these, the winners have been getting these contracts for last 4 or 5 years. So we have been complaining about sole bidder. So this year we don't have a sole bidder, we have two bidders, but they are the same two bidders, which are getting all other projects from the village. It is, I'm not saying that they don't do the right work or the pricing is wrong. I'm questioning the process here. So I'm not blaming anybody for doing wrong work or wrong pricing. I'm just saying the process is wrong. If you knowingly are giving project to some bidder, don't show two bids. Pass a resolution, have guts to say, we as the village council members want to give this project to this person because we have confidence in this person, and then give that project to that person. Don't make up the paperwork for two bids, because this is clearly a made up paperwork of two bids. And if you're just trusting the professionals to do the job, then I don't understand why this is coming for a vote. If you're voting on it, then you are approving it. If it's just trusting the professionals, then you should not be voting on something. So I'm very confused on this process, that how can same people get same project every year, the rates keep increasing, it matches with what is in the budget line item, and now this year it goes one step further, that we have two bidders for two different projects. One is getting one project and the other bidder is getting the second project. And both of these bids are on the same day, June 13th, one is 10th, and one is at 11 a.m. So it is a little difficult to understand. And then the same bidders are getting more other projects in the same packet. So it is a little disturbing. And Deputy Mayor mentioned, Councilman Seaton mentioned about the tree well project. So last year there were only 4 tree wells. This year we are talking about 219, and there were clearly different bids in the range of 250 to 2,500. So this year I'm hoping that if you go out for 219 tree wells, you will not rely on a text bid, and it will be a fair bidding process, because a tree cannot take $300 on the street, $350 on the street, and $2,500 in Central Business District, just by removing extra bricks and putting a PVC pipe 4 feet down. So there is something wrong in that process, and I hope this year you look more closely, and instead of 2,500, that because it's a 219 trees, so it's a bigger number of trees. And those bricks that you mentioned are stopping water to go in the trees. That also stops somebody to open the car. So I have tried opening the car door, and it gets stuck. And lastly, there was a discussion about how many people can vote in April versus November, but I think we are losing the main point that if the election stays in November, we don't get to vote on the budget. We had that right before until 2012, and this year, Board of Ed said that we are introducing a preliminary budget. We will hear the residents, and then based on the resident feedback, we will vote on that. A lot of residents went there, a lot of petition was signed, but nothing changed. We questioned $780,000 on one project. They just changed that project to a different project. So they did not listen to the residents, so we need our voice back. So it's not about how many people are voting in the election, it's about whether we even have the right to vote or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to correct one thing, Mr. Donnie. The project that I mentioned was solely to just take away the brick bands around all the tree wells. So it wouldn't be the larger project that you spoke of included a root guard to guide the roots down. You had the jackhammer. Once you get rid of the bricks on top, there's also a concrete collar about maybe 1 or 2 feet down underneath the soil. So that had to be jackhammered apart. And then the soil was amended, so new soil was brought in, it was mixed, and then a tree was planted, and then 2 drains were put in, and it was triple staked, and we only did 4 of them. So because of if it was a larger number that we did on volume, it would probably be a little bit less. The project that we want to do is just get rid of the brick bands on tree wells that are empty, tree wells that have trees in them, and things like that, because that's the first step. What we did before was like a complete, new tree, everything else. This would be, and it would go out to bid. It would be, probably some kind of construction company or somebody who had the necessary equipment to come in and bust the bricks apart and haul them away and dispose of them properly and everything else. So that is all that would include.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if I may, regarding the bids, they're sealed bids, they're advertised bids, they're sealed bids, they're opened on that date and time, and then it is whoever decides to bid. Our budgets, as all budgets, are public information. They're on our websites, so if a contractor is savvy enough to look at a capital budget and look at it to see what we've budgeted, it's possible they know what we've budgeted. But I'm just telling you that the bid process is not flawed. It's done according to state statute, and as I said, it's advertised. There's a date, time, and place to open the bids. They're sealed bids, and then they're opened.
I just wanted to bring it to your attention on the record, and then whatever you decide.
Okay.
Just for the record, those sealed, those are open to the public.
Yeah, you can attend bid openings.
Right.
So the date, time, and place, and we have had residents attend them. So if you'd like to attend one sometime, feel free.
Hello again.
Yeah, Rorik Holiday, 374 Evergreen Place. I would like to say from the bottom of my heart how pleased I was with the terrific comments that Councilperson Walsh made this evening. That's the Bernie we loved. That's the Bernie we missed. Your comments were right on. They were intellectually honest. You did not play games. You don't have a, now you say it, now you don't. Please, as a resident, continue being that. Whether I agree with you or not doesn't make any difference, but you're terrific. Thank you very much. Now, as far as the discussion about the school board and what to do or not to do, I started scratching my head. I said, here's a school board that runs one of the best school systems in the state, if not the country. And here we are trying to tell them what to do. And here we have a village council, which I will charitably say is not known for its competence. Maybe we should turn the argument on its head and have them come in and tell us what you should do to run an efficient town, very frankly. I just find the whole thing is just crazy. All at once they're the bad guys, wasting money and all that good stuff. Just amazing. Now, as far as locals being given priority, for God's sake, stop this. This is, to me, cognitive dissonance, trying to justify decisions in the past. Just, if you need anybody, get the best person for the job, period. If you're looking for a new CFO, not that a terrific CFO is leaving or anything, but the fact that he knows the streets in Ridgewood means nothing. This is silly. What a silly argument to have. Now, as far as the Shedler playing field, and I'm delighted with the cleanup there, I don't think the Shedler field will ever be used to do Tai Chi, as someone suggested, because it's very, very noisy. But I think what they should do, along the burn, you should build a wall. Because if you have a playing field and some kid's trying to be macho to see if he can kick the ball as high as he can, it lands on Route 17, we can have problems. So, and also the risk of getting my wife to not cook dinner for the next week. But I would try to volunteer the Conservancy that has done so much for Ridgewood, to take the passive part of Shedler and turn it into an arboretum for native plants. And this is something that my wife had suggested 6 years ago, when some of the supporters of certain people in the committee started claiming my wife is for clear-cutting the field, which is just ridiculous. But I'm delighted we're making progress there. And so one last comment to the mayor. I did not vote for you. I may or not vote for you in the future. Having said that, you are my mayor. And from the bottom of my heart, I want you to succeed. If you succeed, we all succeed. Now, what I urge you to do is take a meat cleaver and take a clean break with the past, if you know what I mean. A very clean break with the past. Be your own man. And also, what I would suggest you do is set up a clearly understandable set of tasks or objectives for you and for the town. For instance, the website, it's a joke. Now, I realize some people said that they had done it. It hasn't been done. The website is terrible. We need an ERP system. The fact that, and I wish Jackie was here, but I got a ticket. I was parking at the station, and turned out the guy issuing the ticket did not see the parking because the windows were tinted. And so I took it to the office back here, and the two ladies there just could not give a damn. Well, yeah, you'd better just wait and wait and go in front of the judge and tell him that I wasn't going to wait to go to the judge. It's a silly ticket. It should not have been offered. Then finally, once somebody said, well, go and see the police department. I go down to the police department, and the guy there was a fantastic, great guy. I forget his name. Very, very helpful. Really did his best. But then he had to leave his desk to come with me, to go down to see my car, to say, yes, I do have a ticket. And you know something? When you register your car in Ridgewood, it goes somewhere, and no one has access to it. So I urge you to develop this ERP system. So I have 3 or 4 simple things, including the garage. The garage, I promise you, I'm in favor of it. We're 2 years too late. All sorts of games were played. It's not to the benefit of the town, but better late than never. We need the garage. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments? Welcome back.
Thank you. Matthew Lindenberg, 165 Claremont Road. I want to speak just quickly on two items. One is regarding the parking at the train station. I know you can make some of the people happy all the time and not all the people happy all the time. As a commuter, I'm very much in favor of this. I know everything is a give and take, and there are some sacrifices to go with it, but it seems like a very sound, well thought out plan. I wanted to return to the election date issue again, and I wanted to address four things that I heard tonight.
Sir, could you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Sure. Is this better? Yes. The first was a comment that's been recited a few times about taking away people's right to vote. I want to make very clear that no option that's on the table, April, November, whenever, takes away anybody's right to vote. There's different mechanisms for that voting. There's different mechanisms for having citizen input. If the elections stay in November, everybody still has a right to vote. Not voting on the budget as a line item, if that's the case, admittedly, but there is still the option to vote for Board of Education candidates that support your individual perspective on what the budget should look like. That brings me to the second item, which is the issue related to the number or lack of number of people who have been running for those Board of Education seats. And there's been issues or factors thrown around lack of advertising, around the filing deadline being in July for the November timeframe. The solution for those issues is not moving the election date. That's kind of like saying the air conditioning in my car isn't working, so I'm going to replace the tires. You know, if the issue is not having enough candidates, not having enough visibility for the election process, then we should do things to address the visibility of the election process. The timing of those elections has absolutely nothing to do with that. And so, you know, if the goal is to get more people voting and more people running, then we should address those things and not try to tinker with the timing of the elections to deal with it. Third, Councilman Seaton, you had mentioned that you would wager that for those years where we've had national elections in November, that by the time you got down ballot, that the number of people who are actually voting for Board of Education is probably not that much different than the number of people who are voting in the April timeframe. If we were wagering, I would actually take that wager. But my point is not that. My point is I could be wrong too.
Yeah, so right. I have to see the numbers.
And we're going to get. So I think let's get the data. The data will set us free, right? And I would just urge all of you not to have preconceived decisions based on this, because maybe you are correct, but maybe in fact the vast majority of people who are voting for president and senator and so on actually do make their way down. It's probably somewhere in between in reality. The last item I wanted to address is there were a few comments discussed around whether by moving the election to April we get a different quality of voter. We get a more informed voter. We get a more educated voter. This is an alarming topic of conversation for me. It is not the purview of government to decide who is a good voter. That's not your job.
I don't think we said that.
The job of government is to enable the citizenry to be represented. And more citizens are represented when more of them come out to vote. And that happens as a point of fact in November. I appreciate the fact that we want more education, and there are, again, more things we can do to ensure a more educated voter base, and those things can be done in a November election. The League of Women Voters does a really great job with this, and I'm certain we can do other educational programming as well. But trying to tinker with the timing of elections to skew who comes out to vote is an appalling concept to me and should not be even remotely part of the consideration process. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, did somebody from the audience say that? Not us. I'm sorry.
Okay, is that good?
Yes.
Okay. Lori Weber, 235 South Irving Street. I have to thank my neighbor here because I did hang around to speak, but you really got me off my chair fast because I want to speak on these issues. First of all, I do want to say, as a 34-year resident who put kids through school here, who voted in every election, my kids know that they're not welcome in my house over the age of 18 if they are not voting. My son is actually now a political organizer, so I think that I made my point with them. I will say that there is a difference in how you reach the public at the time of the year. And it's not about choosing what type of voter. Over 34 years, I have canvassed, I have called, up until that very last election, whether it was a Board of Ed candidate or a village council candidate, I have been active. I've met a lot of people in town and spoken to them about why they vote, why they don't vote, what they know, what they don't know. And canvassing is a very interesting experience. You really get to know what motivates voters. And I will tell you that at the 11th hour, there were a lot of people that rushed to the polls at that last village council election. And I know that I personally sent at least 10 of them myself, because I said, oh, I gotta go, because I was on the phone. I was on the phone in a house where people were making calls, and when it came up for air, I was alone, including the homeowner. Everybody was gone but me. And so I disagree. I think there is a time and a place for a community to come together. I am someone who goes around and tries to educate voters. I don't tell people how to vote. I tell people what they're voting about, and I trust that they're going to make a decision. Now, I will answer to your question, Mr. Seaton, because I looked at that question in terms of voter turnout. Now, we had 75% voter turnout in Ridgewood for the 2016 presidential election. We are far and above the nation. And I will say that the voting for the two Board of Ed seats was surprisingly close, if not exactly that. And what that told me was that is about as mindless a vote as you can get. As a person who cares about what I vote about, I don't place mindless votes. I actually put my protest in for the fact that those seats are not being contested unless I really love the candidate. I do not vote. And when I have 75, let's say it was a whole 75% of those people walk in there and place a mindless vote for something that touches our lives as closely as a municipal position, I find that unnerving. I know that for a fact in the fall when people are sending their kids to school, to college, getting back from summer vacation and getting back into the swing of work, they are not listening. And I can tolerate that not listening in a presidential election or even a gubernatorial election, but I don't have to necessarily tolerate it in a municipal election, a local election, because I have a choice of pulling that election into another time frame where we have the public's attention. And that's what I'm looking for. And I will tell you that I have contacted the Board of Ed. I have a rapport with the Board of Ed secretary. I have heard back feedback from Dr. Fishbein and at least one board member who was ignoring the question about moving the vote. These people have been given an opportunity to respond, and they're not. Now all of a sudden they want a robust conversation. Now they want to talk to the village council about it because they found out that you guys can do what they refuse to do. That reminds me of that last Valley Hospital meeting I sat in, the ones that Mayor Killian were running. And I remember, was it those? It may have been a different meeting, but I remember once Valley Hospital realized that they lost the village council's support, suddenly they wanted to negotiate. They wanted a kumbaya moment with the village of Ridgewood after all they put us through, and it was a bad faith comment. It was an empty, disingenuous remark. They never followed through on that anyway, and they never wanted to negotiate with us in the first place. They took a hard line, and they stuck with it until they knew they lost. And that's what the Board of Education is doing to us now. These people did not want to engage with the public. They threw me off of their mailing list, so I don't know about anything they do anymore. I stayed on that list after my kids graduated because I am interested, and they don't want to hear from us. And I would also say, as a little aside, I really like the water bottle story, and I'm going to kindly say to Councilman Blake, I want to see one of those non-disposable water bottles up there on the dais with you next time I come in, because everybody else here I've seen with a reusable one.
Thank you.
I'm going to be watching you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll, before we close public comments and go into closed session, I just want to address some of the questions that were brought up, and I may have to bounce from issue back to the issue because I'm just answering in the order they were posed. So for Shedler, there were questions about the house. What we discussed tonight was just for the plans for the athletic field. So there was no discussion about the house because it wasn't in the scope of the work of the ad hoc committee. The garage, right now what we're looking into in terms of the allocation of spaces, it would be the first level for shoppers and diners, second, third, and fourth level for commuters and employee. There is no plan to designate the most precious and valuable parking spaces for commuters to go to out-of-towners. We have plenty of demand for commuting purposes here in Ridgewood, so that's a top priority. BOE, again, and I love the varying arguments, and everybody was very respectful to each other's opinions, and I appreciate that. It's not just about awareness. Obviously, there's other issues, which is the voting on the budget. This is an ongoing discussion. Obviously, we're going to invite the Board of Ed to come in next week and talk. Before we even sent out the agenda, we notified them that we were doing this. So they were the first to know. They were certainly invited to come here and be present. That they chose not to be here, I don't know why, but they were certainly invited to be here, and I hope that they will accept our formal invitation, explicit invitation, to come in next week and continue the conversation. Regarding the parking at the train station lot, that the public knows very little, we will publish this design and all the particulars to make sure that the word gets out on this. Just understand, we have had no discussion about this since it was first introduced. We just received a letter from SHPO, I think it was yesterday. So this is all fresh information coming in, but we'll certainly make sure that we disseminate the information and get it out to the public so everyone's aware of what's going on. The bidding process, I know that the village manager was saying, look, we're complying with the law, we're doing everything by the book, but I get your point. The book doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best way possible, so any way that we can look at the process and make sure that we're not, being somehow being taken advantage of, we're certainly open to that. The idea of the Conservancy to design the passive areas on the Shedler property, listen, more hands on the plow make for light work. So the more people that we can get in, obviously the more we benefit from the support of volunteers, the less expensive the project becomes as well. And we certainly want the input from people who know what they're doing. Regarding the website, I'm actually thinking now, something I've been thinking over the past couple of weeks is to set up a tech committee. I know other municipalities have done that. Technology has evolved over the years. It's not just about getting a bunch of programmers together. Technology really is about social media, it's about design, it's about marketing. So there's a lot of things that we can gain from that, and I'm sure that in this community of very high achievers, that we can get a good group of folks who can help us improve some of these things. And just the last, going back to the BOE vote, we never said that we would have a more informed voter. I think there was a hypothetical example that was presented as to whether you have a certain amount of kind of voter in April versus the other, but it wasn't necessarily forming the basis for why we had this discussion tonight. So just wanted to make that clear. Anybody else?
I think the question, Matthew, is that your first name, Matthew?
Matthew, yes.
He said that you attributed a comment about the quality of voter to
Quality
a council
voter, right.
member, and nobody up here said it. That was a comment from a member of the public. Nobody up here ever mentioned the quality of a voter, just so you know.
Anybody else? Okay, so with that, we'll go into closed session, take a resolution.
Be resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that the Village Council meet in closed session on June 11, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter, as the matter on the agenda can be reached, and that said closed session be held in the caucus room of the Ridgewood Village Hall, 131 North Maple Avenue, Ridgewood, New Jersey. And be it further resolved that the matters to be discussed in closed session are limited to legal matters to include health barn, the town garage, Ridgewood water lawsuit, and co-op personnel matters to include emergency medical services. These matters are allowable under NJSA 10:4-12 et sec. And be it further resolved that the minutes of this meeting shall be made available to the general public when such matters have been deemed completed by resolution of the Village Council. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?